Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors October 4th meeting. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Christie.
Here.
Supervisor Grijalva.
Here.
Supervisor Hines. Supervisor Hines. Supervisor Scott.
Here.
Chair Bronson.
Here.
Let the record show Supervisor Hines is out. All other board members are present.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to be offered today by Supervisor Scott.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We will now go to the land acknowledgement statement. We have a video of, is it Jamae? Is that Jamae Chilton reading the statement? Thank you for joining us.
Skugbash, Anyanyam Chigik, Jamae Chilton. Hello, my name is Jamae Chilton. I am Thana Otham. I am from the district of Bisama'a, and I am currently working at the Desert Diamond Casinos. I work as a food and beverage supervisor, and I want to thank everybody for having me here. On behalf of Pima County residents, we honor the tribal nations who have served as caretakers of this land from time immemorial, and respectfully acknowledge the ancestral homelands of the Thonothan nations and the multi-millennial presence of the Pascua-Yaqui tribe within Pima County. Consistent with the Pima County's commitment to diversity and inclusion, we strive towards building equal partner relationships with Arizona's tribal nations. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to Pause for Pause. I think there's a video coming up, and here it comes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Monica Dangler. I am the director here at Pima Animal Care Center. And today for Pause, I wanted to introduce you to my friend Kronk. He is one of our newer residents. Him and his family came into us most recently from an overwhelmed caregiver. There was about 23 of them in that house, and we've had several of these situations come in over the last 2 weeks. So we wanted to kind of highlight our special friends that need a little bit more help, a little bit more resources in order to find just the right home and to get used to knowing that people are friendly and how to live in homes. We currently have over 500 dogs in the shelter, and we really are looking for fosters and adopters. Even 2-week fosters are so helpful for any of the dogs in our care. And not only do we have dogs, we also have cats. We have about 100 cats in shelter, but we have kittens still coming in daily. So we can use fosters for medical cats, kittens that are underage, as well as adopters. We are open Monday through Friday, 12 to 7, and weekends 10 to 5 to come meet your new best friend. Or if you would like to foster, you can go to pima.gov/foster to learn more. Hope to see you, whether you're a foster or adopter. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
And just for the record, Supervisor Hines has joined us. We have several corrections to our agenda. On the regular agenda, page 4, item 17, it's a correction to district. It's a confirmation easement related to Teatro Carmen for Arizona State Parks. It should read District 2. And on the consent calendar, page 10, item 26, it's a grant application, grants management and innovation for FEMA. The county administrator is requesting this item be continued to the Board of Supervisors meeting of November 1st. If there are no objections, the agenda is so adjusted.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Christie.
Along with those adjustments, with your permission and the board's permission, I would request that addendum item number 3, which is the county elections department's after action report, be considered immediately after agenda item number 16, which is the primary election after action report, so we can address them consecutively.
All right, so you want that, which is addendum item number
3.
3, to be considered with regular agenda item 16?
That is correct, or consecutively, one after the other.
Okay. Got it. Any other comments? I do want to take a moment of personal privilege. Yom Kippur starts at sundown tonight, and those of that persuasion, it's a day of atonement. And given this last year and all the interesting things that have happened, I think we all should probably be doing some atoning. All right. I think then that takes care of all the housekeeping. We have some presentations. Item number 5 is presentation of Small Business Awards for 2020-2021 to Coffee Times, Home Caregivers of Southern Arizona, Treasures 4, Teachers of Tucson, Make Way for Books, Marcus Engineering, and Why Not Travel LLC. If we could get all of you up here, and I'm going to ask Supervisor Christie to join me in making...
Need to move the item.
Oh, we do need to move I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. There are no objections. Motion carries. And we'll be down sharply.
It's 2 years worth.
Okay, it's 2 years worth. I get it.
Where's the proclamation?
There isn't, there is no proclamation, but why don't we get you? Oh, you're the chair, okay. You used to be the chair.
Let me just speak.
Yeah, just speak. Yep, go ahead.
Madam Chair and members of the board, thank you for taking time today to recognize the Small Business Award winners, and that the Small Business Commission selected for 2020 and 2021 for their resiliency during the COVID pandemic. Nominations were received from all over the county, and it was a really tough decision, since so many small businesses were creative in how they helped their employees and customers in hopefully a once-in-a-lifetime experience. These winners were selected for their positive workplace impacts in workforce development, maintaining a supportive workplace, and fostering community engagement. I would also like to acknowledge the leadership of the Small Business Commission's immediate past chair, Kent Blumenthal, for his leadership during this time. Finally, I'd like to note that the nominations for the 2022 awards are now open until October 28th. We are shifting back to the previous recognition for outstanding urban, rural, and nonprofit small businesses.
You guys do, and I shouldn't just say all of you, because there's male and female, have done a just spectacular job. So glad you exist, and thank you for what you do. And with that, let's give the awards out. And the first one, my favorite, Why Not Travel Store, LLC. You want to say a few words? Tell us what you do.
Hello, everyone. We're Why Not Travel Store, a family-owned business convenience store located in Y, Arizona. It is about 27 miles north of the Mexican border. So that's all. That's us.
Now, and you've got to go see what they do, and you've got to travel to Ajo. And, you know, I represent that district, and when we get to the intersection of 85 and 86, you know, that's, you go, why? Why are we here? And that's where why is. But they're doing a tremendous job. Congratulations. And then treasures for educators. Yep. So tell us how this happened and why you're here today and what you do.
So this happened during COVID. We did stay open every minute. We had absolutely no customers for 5 months, but we stayed up and sanitized and cleaned. And what we did was we provided food banks with educational supplies to pass out to the kids that were stuck at home. We give repurposed things to teachers and trying to save them money and trying to also save the environment.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Marcus Engineering.
Come on down. Come on down this way. This way.
So tell us how you got here today.
Got to show off to everyone.
And how tall are you?
I'm 6'4", young lady.
Okay, you just won my.
Well, I'm Patrick. I'm the president of Marcus Engineering. During the pandemic, it was a tumultuous time for everyone. Luckily, we were able to stay open as a critical infrastructure business. Our business is an electronics consultancy, so we do electronics and embedded systems product development for other companies. We primarily focus on medical device development, military, and aerospace products, which was one of the reasons we were able to stay open. And I take a lot of pride in, during tumultuous times, in creating a stable, safe place for our employees to go to and to know that they still have a salary, that we're going to stay open, that we're going to take care of each other, because all of the rest of the world was in chaos during that time. And certainly being engaged in this wonderful community of ours made that easier, because we were able to stay on top of what was going on. We got to see a little bit of behind the scenes of what was coming down the road, and it's just a wonderful place to be and a great opportunity to keep the best and brightest engineers in our country staying in Tucson. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to Home Watch Caregivers of Southern Arizona. And tell us where you're located, but you're doing a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Home Watch Caregivers works in Tucson, but we also have an office down in Green Valley. And what Home Watch Caregiver does is we take care of people of all ages, but primarily we assist the elderly to stay home. So during COVID, my employees needed to go out. They couldn't stay home. They still needed to ride the bus. They still needed to get to their clients because they needed to make sure their clients could get out of bed and get fed every morning. So this award really is for them. They did a fabulous job taking care of our elderly out there. And we also do babysitting. I try to elect myself to do the 6-week-old babysitting jobs. I don't ever get picked, but that's what I really like to do. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, and thank you for all you do for Pima County and the city of Tucson and all the incorporated towns.
Thank you.
Yep, over there. And then Steve, why don't you do the next one? All right, coffee times. Yay, you. All right, you want to say a few words?
Yeah. So we're located on 3401 East Speedway Boulevard. We're a drive-through only coffee business, and yes, you do. And we just try to be really diligently serve our community during the pandemic. We're very fortunate to stay alive when a lot of other businesses could not, and we just tried to do our best to keep our employees and our customers safe, and yeah, just give back to everybody. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
No, thank you. And you bring up a very good point. These are small business awards, and that they survived the pandemic says a lot about who they are and why we need them in our community. And make way for books, there you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, that's okay. I'm not a loudspeaker. I'm from Make Way for Books, and I'm Melinda. I'm the creative officer there. Make Way for Books has been around as an early literacy nonprofit in Pima County since 1998. We serve about 30,000 young children, ages birth to 5, parents, and educators throughout Arizona, but primarily in Pima County. And during the pandemic, we realized during the close downs that we were going to need to pivot. Most of our work is place-based, so going out into the community and meeting educators and families, but we couldn't do that at that time. So we took maybe a 2-week reassessment break, and then moved all of our work to new digital platforms. We have a Make Way for Books app that's used throughout Arizona and nationally and even internationally now. And we really just pivoted to book deliveries, driving out to meet families where they were safely that way, and then doing all of our work online. And it's something that those innovations now allow us to reach people in places we never could have reached before in Pima County. So we're really honored to be a part of this work.
We are so lucky to have you in this community. There you go. And we're all going to go over here. Come on, you guys, too. I don't know how we do a photo op, but we're going to try.
Madam Chair, I'd also like to acknowledge our at-large members, Josh Jacobson.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm at large.
You probably don't want the photo behind it. You guys, come on.
Yeah, we're going to have to.
I'll be back here.
You guys are all tall. Oh, goodness.
Make some room.
No, we're smiling.
All right, we are going to move on to item 6, presentation proclamation to Barbara Escobar, Natalie Shep, and Department of Environmental Quality, and Christina Flores from the Health Department. Rock and Roll to School Week, proclaiming October 4th through the 10th to be Rock and Roll through to School Week. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. I think Supervisor Grijalva will be making the presentation.
Okay.
Whereas the Pima County Department of Environmental Quality and the Pima County Health Department are working together to promote Walk and Roll to School Week in Pima County, and whereas the health and safety of our children are the highest concern of the residents of Pima County, and whereas driving students to school in private vehicles contributes to traffic congestion and air pollution, creating concentrated levels of air pollution around the schools, and whereas the lack of physical activity plays a leading role in rising rates of obesity, diabetes, and other health problems among children, and being able to walk and bike to school offers an opportunity to build activity into our daily routines, and whereas community members and leaders should make plans to improve infrastructure near schools to ensure the safety of children to walk, bicycle, and skateboard or scooter to classes. And whereas research shows that when children and families and caregivers choose active transportation for their daily commutes to school, they feel more grounded and connected to their community, instilling a sense of belonging and responsibility to other people in that community. And whereas an important role for parents and caregivers is to teach children about pedestrian safety and about health and environmental risks related to physical inactivity and air pollution. Whereas Walk and Roll to School weeks have proven to be helpful in encouraging children to safely walk and bicycle to school and creating and promoting local safe road to school programs across the United States and throughout the world. Now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims the week of October 4th through October 10th to be Walk and Roll to School week, and urges all students, parents, teachers, administrators, school and school districts in Pima County to participate in these events and encourage everyone to consider the safety and health of children this week and every week. Passed and adopted this day, 4th day of October 2022. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for sponsoring this proclamation, and we really appreciate it. We feel like this is a really important opportunity to highlight this issue. We want to promote fitness. We want to make sure that people realize their choices that they make about how they get their children to school will affect their health and the health of the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll take a picture.
We'll now move on to the Addendum Agenda and a presentation proclamation to Kristen Hernandez, CEO, Girl Scouts of Southern Arizona, and Sophie Estrada, Girl Scout, proclaiming the day of Tuesday, October 11th, 2022 to be Girls Takeover Day. I'll move the item.
Yay.
Motion and a second. Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Supervisor Grijalva will make the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I'll give you an opportunity to see this. Okay. Whereas Plan International, a girls' rights organization, began the global Girls Takeover movement on International Day of the Girl, October 11th, as a call to action to tear down barriers of discrimination and prejudice that continue to hold girls back. And whereas an untold number of girls around the world have stepped up into roles in media, entertainment, business, and politics for a day to demand equal power, freedom, and representation for girls and young women. And whereas the Girls Takeover movement puts girls in a position to occupy spaces where they have rarely been, where they are rarely seen or heard, and to make it clear that they have the right to be there without being silenced or ignored. And whereas Pima County is a champion of girl ambition and supports gender balanced leadership, and whereas Pima County is a proud supporter of the Girl Scouts of Southern Arizona, now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims Tuesday, October 11th to be Girls Takeover Day, and encourages all businesses and community members to lift up and amplify the voices of girls in their leadership roles today as they join the Girls Takeover movement in Pima County and as they continue leadership roles into the future. Passed and adopted this 4th day of October 2022. Congratulations. Yay.
Thank you so much for this proclamation. We're really thrilled to bring a global movement here to Southern Arizona and in Tucson. So on October 11th, International Day of the Girl, we will be having girls in key positions of power within those industries described. So we will have CEOs for the day, police chiefs of the day, etc. So we thank you for your support and for supporting our pipeline of female leaders.
Thank you to the Board of Supervisors, and thank you so much for believing in our mission as Girl Scouts and believing in girls.
Though I'm going to interrupt just briefly. You have a lot of, how many badges do you have? Turn around. Yeah, do you have any more room? Can you earn another badge? Where's it going to fit?
They're going to have to get another one.
All right, thank you. Okay, we now move on to call to the public. And again, as a reminder, individuals wishing to participate telephonically must contact the clerk's office by the deadline listed on the agenda. Each speaker will need to complete a speaker card and will be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Actually, because we have a number of speaker cards today, quite a number, the limit today is going to be 2 minutes. Speakers must adhere to the rules of civility and refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. When you are called upon to speak, please step forward to the podium, state your name for the record, and direct comments to the Board of Supervisors.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Speakers who do not abide by these guidelines will have their comments interrupted. Thank you. Supervisor.
Madam Chair, I would ask respectfully that you reconsider your time limitation and return it to the 3 minutes. These folks.
What's the pleasure of the board?
These folks came down here with the understanding that was advertised for 3 minutes. They prepared their remarks.
Okay, we're going in the future advertise it for 2 minutes, but today we'll do 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, we have one person joining us telephonically, and that is Dr. Joanne DiFilippo. Doctor, are you available?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chair Bronson and Supervisors. My name is Dr. Joanne DiFilippo, a Pima County taxpayer in District 3. Today I'd like to provide brief comments on what I refer to as house cleaning duties to which this board has been remiss. First, on or about April 19, 2022, this board voted to have a return to work policy drafted. To the best of my knowledge, that policy has never been presented to the public for review. Please clean this up and require staff to produce the draft policy. Don't leave your house in a sloppy mess. Secondly, as you're aware, Board Policy D23.9 and Pima County Personnel Policy 8-119Z9 have been rendered unconstitutional by the Arizona Attorney General. These policies refer to personnel administration for political affiliation protection, namely, quote, county employees shall not make a political contribution for any candidates for any elected county office, unquote. You have received copies of the AG's December 17, 2020 opinion on multiple occasions. However, it is almost 2 years since the AG's opinion was rendered, and you have yet to correct this policy. What I find interesting about your refusal to address this violation is how you conversely allow donations from persons whose companies receive lucrative county contracts and funding options. Why is that? Remember, Chuck said, if any employee has a problem, let them take it up with HR. I say no. You are engaging in unconstitutional behavior toward county employees. I want to prove my point here. I took a look at campaign finance statements for Democrat-backed supervisors, and I discovered there was a $1,000 donation from Mike Rossi of Rossi and Associates, who just received over $400,000 in 2 contracts awarded from this board in just the past month. Various contributions from executive management at Paradigm Laboratories, who received over $55 million in COVID funding contracts since January 19, 2021, and various contributions from Priscilla Storm and David Goldstein of Diamond Ventures, who received a $15 million taxpayer-backed loan for the establishment of the Rocking K Community Facilities District real estate development. Thus, it appears you're willing to take away the constitutional rights of county employees while you actively engage in acceptance of campaign donations from individuals whose companies were awarded lucrative contracts and taxpayer-backed funding. I suggest you remove the contribution restriction from policy D23.9 now or face legal consequences. In conclusion, si alguien necesita que yo explico esto en español, por favor avísame y yo lo hago. Gracias. Thank you, Chair Bronson.
And again, lower the sound. We need to get through these. There are quite a few. Judy Rich.
Madam Chair and Board of Supervisors, thank you for allowing me time to address you today. My name is Judy Rich, and I am the CEO of TMC Health, a nonprofit, community-focused health system that serves all of Pima County. I'm here today to ask for your support for the intergovernmental agreement between Pima County and Access that is before you today. The Access to Professional Services Initiative, we call it APSI, provides support to hospitals that serve low-income and indigent patients and provide physician graduate medical education. The Pima County faces a critical shortage of providers, as identified in the last Pima County Community Health Needs Assessment. That assessment identified access to care and mental health as the most critical health priorities. In fact, 17 of the 23 primary care areas in Pima County are designated as health professional shortage areas by the federal government, and 19 of them are medically underserved as designated by Arizona. We have a huge lack of physicians in our community, and it's growing worse. APSI addresses these critical needs by providing federal funding for graduate medical education and expansion of primary and specialty care in our region. Our Tucson medical education program at TMC Health currently offers multiple residencies, and we are growing so that we can meet the upcoming future need for physicians. TMC Health serves all of Pima County, from Oro Valley to Vail and beyond. We are expanding to serve more of our community with a new hospital scheduled to open next year at Drexel and Heaton, and new investments in primary and specialty care in Green Valley. In 2021, TMC Health spent $47.5 million of our net revenues, or 6.7%, for programs in direct care that benefit our community. This includes $11.3 million in uncompensated care and $4.3 million in direct community support. More than 25% of TMC Health's patient encounters are covered by the state's Medicaid program. We have a long history of collaborating with Pima County and the Pima County Department of Health, including support for victims of sexual assault in collaboration with Kodak, a public health town hall series developed, and a partnership to promote COVID and other vaccines in our community, and so much more. We request your support from the intergovernmental agreement that will draw down critical funds to allow us to continue to serve the most valuable in our community, and there's 9 seconds left.
Well, thank you. And you've got your remarks written out. Would you mind presenting them to the clerk, and we'll put them online?
Thank you. Thank you. That's stressful with the clock.
When the clock is ticking. Can you imagine surgeons, though, in operations?
Yes, I can. Yes.
All right. Daniel Wood.
Good morning, Pima County Board of Supervisors. My name is Daniel Wood, and I'm a Pinal County resident. I'll get right to the point. When the right to vote is violated, the laws created and enforced by elected officials can no longer be considered an expression of citizens' free choice and self-determination. As the court said in Westbury versus Sanders, no right is more precious in a free country than that of having a voice in the election of those who make the laws under which, as good citizens, we must live. Other rights, even the most basic, are illusionary if the right to vote is undermined. Our rights in the state of Arizona have been undermined due to severe violations of our First and 14th Amendment rights, electoral due process, and equal protection clause. In order for any type of voting machine to be used lawfully in Arizona, they have to be certified by federal laboratories. These labs must be accredited by the Elections Assistance Commission under the Help America Vote Act of 2002 to properly certify all types of voting machines and tabulators. The two laboratories and/or government contractors which have issued machine certifications for voting machines in this state were not in contract to do so, and therefore any federal voting machine certification is void. These labs put themselves forward as if they were approved and legal to do business. The labs performed in services and accepted payment for services and issued certifications to imply that our critical infrastructure was safe. States depended on this to begin state-level due diligence. The False Claims Act, 31 U.S. Code 3729, protects from government contractors falsely billing the government for services when they are not compliant with laws, rules, and regulations. The federal machine certifications are false. The laboratories that issued the certificates for voting machines and tabulators were not even in contract to do so. These contract labs committed consumer fraud by advertising falsehoods and misleading the public that the voting machines were certified according to law and that their companies were accredited, and they continue to defraud the state of Arizona and the people. Whoever falsely assumes or pretends to be an officer or employee under the authority of the United States or department, agency, or officer thereof and acts as such shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years or both. Deprivation of rights under the color of law, you all fall under this, even lawyers and judges. In the court cases Reynolds versus Sims, the fundamental decision of voter rights, the Supreme Court held that any alleged infringement of the rights of the citizens to vote must be carefully and meticulously scrutinized. The further Yickwo versus Hopkins, the fundamental right to vote protected by equal protection clause is also liberty interest protected by substantive due process clause. Griffin Burns held that the Constitution confers upon the states the power to control the deprivation of contest over elections, state and local officials. It says that y'all have the power. These machines are unconstitutional. Get rid of them.
Again, I want to warn the audience, no clapping. We need to move this forward. I appreciate your interest, but let's lower the rhetoric a little bit. And Michael Schaefer, is it? Or the enthusiasm, I should say.
Yes, dampen our enthusiasm. Yeah, not happening. Right.
Well, then somebody's leaving.
That's electoral due process violation too. So you have
Right.
keep on adding to it.
Voting supervisors, thank you for giving us an opportunity to speak. I, too, will be speaking on the voting machines. I own an accredited test lab. I know clearly what that involvement is. And in Arizona, 16-442B, there's a law written in Arizona. It's codified into statute. It says machines, referring to voting machines or devices, used at any election for federal, state, or county may only be certified for use in this state and used if they comply with the Help America Vote Act. That's a federal act. We've adopted it in the state of Arizona under this law. And if those machines or devices only can be used if those machines and devices have been tested and approved by a laboratory that is accredited pursuant to the Help America Vote Act. And what I can tell you is, and we have evidence available that can be reviewed where the voting machine accreditation statements have been modified and changed over the years to try to counteract the statements of the accreditations in the beginning. And so those machine companies that have been doing the certifications labs have to adhere to the Voter System Test Laboratory Program Manual, which says the effective date of the certification of the lab shall not exceed a period of 2 years. The accreditation that was originally submitted was 3 years by the time of the election, therefore invalidating the certification. And the problem is, if you don't have a certified or accredited lab, they cannot certify a machine. If a machine is not properly certified, it cannot create a certifiable vote. And that's what's happened in elections 2018, 2020, and is about to happen in 2022. So the questions to consider, and Commissioner O'Connor had sent a letter to all the voting supervisors in the state. We hope that you've looked at that. That contains an analysis done by someone who acts as a judge in his role as commissioner on evidence. We've got 4 hours worth of evidence that was provided at a meeting this past Saturday, all of which you were invited to attend. So I would say, I would ask the question, if you just saw, and I realize we're not in a communicating and answering question, but if you saw that it was just one reason, just a smidgen of a problem, like one broken law, which can compromise and steal elections, what would you do? What should you do? You have a responsibility to the people of the state. You have a responsibility to the Constitution, and staying within the boundaries of the laws is important. I hope you have all seen in your roles that the Department of Homeland Security has produced a CISA document on the many voting machine issues.
Thank you. Your 3 minutes is up. I appreciate it. You're welcome to submit any comments to the clerk.
Okay, and I've left packages for each of you. Thank you.
Okay. Drew Heaton. Drew Heaton. Drew, are you here? Yeah, I didn't hear you. Okay. Sorry about that.
Madam Chair and distinguished members of the board, as you know, and for the record, my name is Drew Heaton. As previously stated, I am the daughter of a U.S. American, Eugene Franklin Rowe, a World War II Marine Corps vet who fought in the South Pacific, and Jane Kia Nui Nui Okalani Awa, a native Hawaiian citizen of the still illegally occupied Hawaiian Kingdom. It's important that I make this statement so that my words will not be interpreted as anything less than patriotic. I love the United States of America as I love my father, and I love the Hawaiian Kingdom as I love my mother. Only Madam Bronson and Supervisor Christie will remember me standing in this very spot declaring my sovereignty as a reluctant yet very angry activist over 6 years ago. I believed that was an American tradition. Ironically, so did Queen Liliuokalani. I was politically naive, to say the least. Once again, I stand before you asking you to restore that sacred American tradition. An American tradition, by the way, that our founders drew upon, yes, not only from the great founders, of great European and Asian philosophers, but also from the indigenous tribes already on this continent. If a tree falls in the forest but no one hears it, does it make a sound? If history is erased and not remembered, does it exist? Sovereignty is simply a term to describe jurisdiction. To be a sovereign nation means only U.S. American law has jurisdiction here. You have the power to remove foreign influence from our community. Don't take the money. Since I have a little bit of time left, I'd like to address the 2 minutes issue. Because I have been here for somewhat of a long time, there was a time, especially when we were in the midst of fighting against Monsanto, that calls to the public went on for hours. I understand how they did. They went, Steve, you'll have to back me up on this. There's a nod. No, it went on for hours.
Wow.
Hours. It wasn't. It was hours.
At each point.
So I understand how difficult it is for you to sit and listen to the public, but then that moved to shortening our voice, to during the weaponized narrative, as I call it, those screens were put up back there because since we couldn't get into this room, you could not tolerate that we had signs. So please do not silence the voice of the people.
Peter Norquist. Peter Norquist.
All right. Good morning, members of the board. My name is Peter Norquist, for the record. And good news for you, I have 2 speaker cards in there accidentally, so you actually have 1 less person to worry about. I read this at the last EIC meeting, but would like to repeat it today. I wish to focus specifically on voting software and offer the below as one example of many possible problems of concern when it comes to the issues of predetermined algorithms being used to manipulate our voting process. Please note that this is only one possible scenario of many which are both possible and have been documented. A review of the global election management systems, known as GIMS, which counts approximately 25% of all votes in the U.S., can be found at blackbox.org, and please refer there for proof of code I'm about to discuss. The results of this study demonstrate that a fractional vote feature is embedded in each GIMS application, which can be used to invisibly yet radically alter election outcomes by presetting desired vote percentages to redistribute votes. This tampering is not visible to election observers, even if they are standing in the room and watching the computer. Use of the decimalized vote feature is unlikely to be detected by auditing or canvass procedures and can be applied across large jurisdictions in less than 60 seconds. GIMS vote counting systems are and have been operated under 5 trade names: Global Election Systems, Diebold Election Systems, Premier Election Systems, Dominion Voting Systems, and Election Systems and Software, the one currently in use in our county. In a case of fractionalized voting, instead of 1, the vote is allowed to be 1/2 or 1 7/8 or any other value that is not a whole number. This allows weighting of races. Weighting a race removes the principle of 1 person, 1 vote to allow some votes to be counted as less than 1 or more than 1. Regardless of what the roll votes are, candidates can receive a set percentage of votes and results can be controlled. For example, candidate A can be assigned 44% of the votes, candidate B 51%, and candidate C the rest. Instructions to treat votes as decimal values instead of whole numbers are inserted multiple times in the GIMS source code itself. Thus, this feature cannot have been created by accident. Fractionalizing the vote, which create the summary results, allows alteration of election night web results and results sent to the Secretary of State as well as local election officials. As I mentioned, this is only one specific example amongst many fatal vulnerabilities baked into the present system, which not only enable but invite vote manipulation. The most recent being the recent vote to allow the Pima County voter data rolls to be uploaded to the Amazon cloud to be managed from a private residence. I implore you to study this topic, allow an appropriate investigation into our own system, and make appropriate corrections. Failure to do so will not only implicate you now that you have been made aware of this issue, but will result in widespread loss of faith in what is quickly becoming a broken system. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Tara Radliff. Tara Radliff. Tara Radliff.
Good morning. My name is Tara Radliff. I am a former Pima County deputy and a Yuma County deputy and detective. My concerns are regarding our local law enforcement and how your COVID-19 policies have affected them and in turn our community. I have spoken to local law enforcement officers, which I now will refer to as LEOs, and their spouses. There are a multitude of serious concerns that I feel need to be addressed. The first is the almost complete loss of morale and the feelings of betrayal that the LEOs have towards their agencies. They have put their lives and their families' lives at risk to continue to work and keep our community safe, and their agencies have not had their backs. LEOs have felt coerced into vaccination with the threat of loss of their livelihoods and retirements. There has been a loss of potential new hires due to the vaccine mandate. Unvaxxed LEOs are being punished monetarily and with no possibility of promotion or transfers. Many LEOs have retired, transferred, and resigned due to the mandate, creating unsustainable staff shortages, which puts their lives and our community at risk. The level of overtime LEOs are being made to work right now has not been seen in the past decades, and this will hasten their burnout. Some are working on multiple weeks with no days off. The Corrections Department staff was devastated by the mandate. Many COs voluntarily left because of it, and now our deputies are being made to cover their shifts outside and inside the jail without proper training and required to do so even if they are not vaccinated. There's been a major impact on local criminal justice. The county attorney's office is so backlogged they cannot catch up. They are offering sweetheart plea deals to serious criminals and dismissing or refusing good cases. LEO families have also been affected. The spouses are feeling intense anxiety and stress every day, on top of the usual fear of wondering if their LEO will come home safe. And the stress causes short tempers and strain on their marriages. The spouses are having to pick up more duties at home on top of everything else, and the children barely see their LEO parent. The families of our LEOs are their support system, and they are being eroded away. My hope is that this information will help guide you in making future policies with the health and well-being of our LEOs in mind, their families, and the safety of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anastasia Tasakis.
It's Anastasia Tasakis. You know, I keep wondering what the hell is going on in Pima County. Yeah. What the hell are you doing? Yeah. Actually, we know what you're doing. That's a hypothetical. And why isn't Matt Hines here if physically in person? Yeah. You know, you all wonder why you're having these staff shortages in the hospitals, and especially with what Tara said about our LEO officers. You all should be ashamed of yourselves. Really, honestly, you all should be in jail. You all should be arrested and charged with crimes against the people of this county. Except for Mr. Christie, who seems to be the only one who's got a level head on his shoulders. Yes. And common sense. And I'm not saying this for a popularity contest. This is serious. And then, you know, you want to have kids walking and rolling to school. I really seriously doubt you want to have them doing that here in Tucson. Yes. With all the vagrants and the illegals here, which brings me to my next point. You guys should not be funding illegals. We have people here in Pima County who need the assistance more than the illegals who are here. Why are you giving millions of dollars? Excuse me, I got to pull my thing. I can't get my phone open. I'm so mad right now. You guys are sitting here acting like the illegals get a free pass over all the other illegals that are coming here legally. We have federal laws. Do you understand? We have a constitution that is still in place and will not go away despite every attempt that you try to destroy it. We are serving the illegals before we serve the people of this community. You all should be just absolutely ashamed of yourselves. And again, I say you are violating the Constitution of the United States. You are violating the Constitution of the Arizona territory here. Not to mention every law that lays in this county that you guys have circumvented, you danced around, and you keep stepping all over the people of Pima County to use our tax dollars to fund these illegals, to give them free food, to use our hotels so that they can destroy our hotels, destroy our county, and yet they get a free pass with all the free buses and they get shipped off everywhere, and you don't even know that these people are who they are. We got MS-13 here. We've got too many other people that come here with fake identities. I guarantee you not one of you knows who these people are. And you all can sit here and look at me and shake your heads. We've come here numerous times and warned you. When is enough going to be enough? When one of them comes after your family, Ms. Grijalva? Yes. One of your family, Mr. Scott? Especially you, Dr. Hines. And then you want to talk about no caregivers in the hospitals. Well, they didn't take the jab. That's why.
Deb Wolf. Deb Wolf. Deb Wolf. Wolf.
Before I address the matter for which I came today, I do want to sidebar on the previous speaker. When I was on disability, I was receiving $156 for food stamps a month with no form of income. And when I received in the mail a letter that said my benefits were dropped to $18, it was very hard. It was very hard. And when I went back for an interview to try and understand why, they said it was because of all the illegals allowed over the border who were receiving benefits. So I was left with $18 income per month because of the more visible, politically correct actions of our representatives. I'm going to stop right there. I don't need to say more. I think you got the message. So really why I'm here today is because I have a passion for election integrity, irrespective of political party. All I want is a fair vote for a fair vote cast. And I must tell you just briefly that this was rooted in my mother's service to the local elections. She would get up, for over 30 years, she supported and served on every election in my home county. And yeah, they'd get up at 5:30 in the morning and bring their coffee and donuts and chat with the people there. But it was community-based. It was at the local elementary school. It was at the local library. It was at places people knew and traveled to recently, including churches and other entities. And I think if you haven't, if you've been at all aware of what's going on in our country with regard to voting, you will know that this is not merely a local city county issue. It's not merely a state issue. It is a federal issue, and it is an issue of national security. What I ask is that we go back to something that really works, which is a paper ballot. Half of you know what that is and have experienced it. Why? Why would we do this? Why would we want a hand count, a one-day election, voter ID, signature verification, and the downsizing of the political voting districts so they can be managed by local citizens? All of these issues are not technically difficult to implement. It's been done before. Sometimes what's broken is what's new. Let's go back to what truly worked and had been vetted for tens and tens of years. I can find no reason not to. Now, briefly with regard to the report to the Election Integrity Committee, I believe it's called, there is absolutely no evidence of best practices in that report.
And thank you, your time has expired. Thank you.
Computers are hackable. Computers are hackable. Computers are hackable.
Tim Locks.
Good morning.
I pronounced it correctly.
Well, that's because I put it in parentheses.
I know, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't want to take a chance this time around. Okay, my name is Tim Locks. I'm just, before I get into my electronic voting system notes, my wife is a phlebotomist. She changed jobs about a year ago, went from St. Mary's to Norquist, lasted 3 weeks, and then it was, oh, by the way, bring in your mandate card, that you've been vaccinated. She hasn't worked since. All right, she's got lupus, psoriasis. There's about 3-4 other things that she's got. She's a medical basket case, and they didn't even do any testing on people with lupus. So here she's out of a job. It certainly has affected us financially. Just wanted to let you know. Look at the Nuremberg Code. This is an experimental drug. It is not something you can mandate people take. Okay, on to the election system. $2 million. I'll just try to keep all this in a nutshell. $2 million. A system represented to be a centralized database, and you got a distributed database. I guess it's okay to go down to a car dealership and buy a car you thought had a 4-liter engine in it, but it's a 3-liter engine, and you just say that's okay. It's not okay. Okay, the next one, the recorder's office uses different software than the elections office for early voting. I don't know if you guys knew that, but that recorder's office software actually talks to the server here in Tucson, to a centralized database. All right? Next thing, we've got voters that were disenfranchised across the country. You have managed to spend another $90,000 for an outside vendor. All elections department, they've completely failed on their testing. Sideways communication is still in the after action report. It's not an IT term. I don't know what she's talking about. Since I'm running out of time, transparency with this election is absolutely impossible. Why? Because Tenix is not going to disclose their source code to us to see if there are any anomalies in how they calculate the vote. So how can you say this is going to be a fair election? We've got vendors running our election, not we the people. All righty? That's not cool. Not cool at all. You got an outside vendor working out of his house to maintain a cloud database, by the way, that Amazon Web Services, they deplatformed a conservative social media platform. Lawsuits across the country. Hiring a project manager,
your time
please.
has expired.
Two more issues, please.
Expired.
Please.
No, your time has expired.
Okay. Well, this is shameful. Very shameful.
Ann Rose. Ann Rose. You will, if you continue speaking, you will be removed from this premises.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Really good books here. The Real Dr. Anthony Fauci and Resisting Medical Tyranny. 3 minutes. Let me see now. I wanted to just comment on some of the agenda items or the beginning of this meeting about recognizing the small businesses who lasted through the COVID pandemic. But I'd like you to also recognize the businesses that didn't make it and what happened to them. We don't know. I can't find out. Also, the children with the walk and roll. It's wonderful that you're thinking about the health and wellness of the children, but what about those dang COVID injections that were approved? I was at the Board of Health meeting when the medical director for the Pima County Health Department approved that, was so happy about it. What's happening to the children there? And then for girls. All right, I'm a girl, big one.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
All right, girls? Girls. But the medical establishment in the United States now refers to pregnant women as pregnant individuals. It's just so weird. But on to my comment. I wanted to talk about Dr. Anthony Fauci, who, as the highest paid federal employee, is resigning. On his way out, he kind of stuck it to the American taxpayer and granted hundreds of thousands of dollars to the University of North Carolina, Dr. Ralph Barrick, who was doing the gain-of-function studies, the SARS-CoV-2. They got more money at the end of September. So Dr. Fauci, on his way out, he's kind of sticking it to us. He's been the head of NIAID since the 80s. I was working on the AIDS ward at San Francisco General back then. He's been around for a long time, and it was just disclosed that he made about $2 billion or $5 billion in the last 2 years, personal income. Let's see, about those puppy experiments, I needed to just speak to that so you know what kind of an individual we've been paying our hard-earned tax dollars to. What he did with those beagles, okay, they were let's just say strapped down, and their heads were in a cage, and sand fleas were allowed to attack the beagles. They were not anesthetized for this experiment. I don't remember what the experiment was for, something maybe about their heads, their brains. These poor little beagle puppies bred for these experiments, they had their vocal cords severed so they couldn't scream and cry to disturb the scientists there. So anyway, do not blindly follow those corrupted federal agencies like the NIH, CDC, FDA. Thank you.
Thank you. Surely required. Surely required.
Hello and thank you, esteemed board. My name is Shirley Reckward. I'm a retired registered nurse and an ordained chaplain. And I'm here to speak to a lot of these same issues that you've already heard, Mr. Christie. First of all uncertified machines are a national cybersecurity risk that is unsecure, hackable, and inaccurate. One item. Number two, millions of dollars, millions and millions of new dollars are being directed specifically to supporting illegals, and not $1 to help our increasingly tumultuous, chaotic, homeless situation in our community. Are you people out of your minds?
Yes, they are.
Okay. I think that you'll agree with me that we have all done and or said things that we've later come to regret. We wish we could have a mulligan, a do-over, if you will, and have the event erased, essentially forgotten by those who have been affected by it. Would you agree? Perhaps your personal event was truly humiliating and had widespread news coverage, such as driving into a running wash and then needing to be rescued at great expense to our already overwhelmed resources. Or maybe your personal happenstance involved interactions with a member of the public here. Perhaps you showed your true colors, so to speak, in an unbecoming and immature manner. Maybe you were warned repeatedly by our county attorney, to not interrupt one of the speakers. However, in order to show your superiority to rules and that you were, quote unquote, above the law, you decided to just display a poster of your displeasure with a speaker's presentation, being incredibly disrespectful to that person, distracting the other board members from being able to focus on that speaker, and acting patently immature. Maybe your tail will be between your legs when you're faced with the facts that it was the vaccinated rather than the unvaccinated who were spreading COVID through shedding post-vaccine. So much for wanting the unvaccinated to be charged with murder, don't you think? And let's appoint to the public board health someone who epitomizes health, whose beverage of choice is something other than health-destroying sodas. Another objection is that that appointment is rather illegal, considering that that person already would be holding three board positions. Illegally. TUSD, the Board of Supervisors, and now the Board of Health. We can do much better by appointing Mr. Steve Christie. I think that you see the way I'm leaning here, and it's definitely toward healing and keeping our community safe. Thank you very much.
Stephanie Kirk. Stephanie Kirk. Stephanie Kirk.
My name is Stephanie Kirk, and it's an honor to be here. Shame on the board member who suggested that Adelita fill the health department. She could even fill her seat when the call to the public started. Shame on you, Adelita. Even if it's not illegal, it should be illegal to sit on so many seats and be a dictator. Take it up, girl. As injuries and deaths increased, the FDA begged to hide the information until 2076, until the Board of Supervisors continued to push drugs to receive government grants. The financial entanglement that you guys have heard me talk about between the regulatory agencies and pharmaceutical companies can be seen at the Board of Supervisors in the form of intergovernment agreements, the grants. What were the guidelines for this free money? Well, this reminds me of consent item number 7, which adds an additional $100,000 to the already collected $150 to promote COVID and flu vaccines for REACH. The REACH program, which specifically targets American Indians and Mexican Americans. As a taxpayer, I am already paying for the injections. Why do you want me now to pay to advertise it to people who didn't want it the first 3 years? It's old and it's a stinky vaccine. I also disagree with Consent Agenda 11, 13, and 26. Since when did the government become socialist? As a new BA.4/5 booster rolls out, keep in mind that the old one failed, so why will this one be any different? The bivalent vaccines have been authorized to use as a single booster dose at least 2 months after the primary or the booster vaccination. Really, 2 months? 2 months? That's where we are? Should we just get an IV? Also, the CDC has said that the COVID-19 vaccinations may be co-administered with the flu vaccination, which is concerning to me, knowing that we've got pathogenic priming and virus interference by Deb Wolf. The FDA and the Pima Board of Supervisors are relying on the manufacturer's rodent study, which shows an antibody response rise in the mice against the BA.4 and BA.5, but no long-term studies or human data. As the jab mounts a higher antibody response against the variant, will it translate to a clinical efficacy, or will it hurt more than it saved? I have so many babies being born on my husband's side and my side that are being born with seizures. Why? Huh? Why do I have children that have seizures after their routine vaccine schedule? I don't know. When are we all going to wake up and see that we were given everything that we need? Unless you have problems stopping putting things in your mouth. Diet, exercise. Did you kill my mic? I have 12 seconds left.
You have 7.
Well, you know what? I would have had more if you didn't kill it.
It wasn't killed.
It didn't sound like it was going to me. It wasn't. See, it wasn't. Why don't you give me my time? Give me my time. Right, guys?
Yeah. It was on.
It wasn't on. It wasn't on. I can hear it with my own ears.
Please sit.
Yeah, well, I think we all know.
We
all know. You couldn't even sit, Adelita. You took my mic off, and everybody's going to be able to tell when you go online. And then you'll just look like a liar.
Ron Coco?
You're outnumbered.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Hold my mic.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Ron Coco. I'm a resident of Green Valley, Arizona for the last 6 years. I worked 3 different elections. The last election that I worked was probably the worst. The reason I say that is when we got done with the election, it took us an additional 2 hours for the inspector to fill out the proper paperwork to drop off the ballots at the library. By the time we got all that completed, we got to the library at 9:15. Then, because the people that transported the ballots to Tucson had already left, we had to contact the sheriff's department. We waited another 20 minutes for the sheriff's department to come. I live right across the street from the library. I contacted the sheriff's department again and said I was going home and that they could come and pick up the ballots at my house, which is what they did. Now, all those things aren't the way things are supposed to be done, of course. And my second issue was actually a training issue. We all had training, but when we have training, there's no testing after the training. So how do you know that the people were trained learned anything from the training? I have to go through training again for this next election, But I don't see anywhere where they're asking people to be tested after the training, because the inspector that was at our site didn't know what she was doing. I reported that also to the county, that she shouldn't be allowed to work any more elections because she's a nice person. I like her personally, but she doesn't know what she's doing. And it shouldn't take 2 hours after the election to tally the ballots to end up being able to go to the library. My second issue is I spent 24 hours working for the county. I get $175. Minimum wage is over $12 an hour. That equates to like $9 an hour. The county seems to have a lot of money for all these other things, and people mention illegals and things, but they don't have enough funds to fairly compensate us that serve our country by working the election. That's just not right. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Hartz. Deborah Hartz. Deborah Hartz.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here and to be able to speak to you. And I want to bring you some good news today. What I'm going to speak about has to do with what you're going to be talking to somebody in an executive session later. And I want to tell you about my daughter, Andrea. In 1980, she was born January 14th, and she was 3.5 months premature. My daughter should have come in April, but she came in January, and she spent some time in the NICU. But she grew up and she became a wonderful person. So anyway, my daughter did happen to be blind. She's totally blind, has no light perception. But she has worked her entire adult life. She spent 8 years in South Dakota as a relay operator for the deaf. When they closed the job there, because the CEO had died and his son was taking over in Texas, she went to look for work on her own. She moved back to Tucson. So anyway, about that time, there was some kind of thing that came from President Obama's thing that said if you didn't have health insurance, you were going to be fined. She always obeys the law, so she started trying to get on access, and they told her, as a blind person, she has no light perception, she could not get access unless she applied for SSDI. Well, she didn't consider herself disabled, and she didn't think she was unable to work, and she didn't want to apply for SSDI. But finally, because it took her a year to find a job, she applied for SSDI. They asked her, when did she become unable to work? Because she had a long work history. She said, I'm unable to work because nobody has hired me yet. They asked her, when were you unable to do chores? She wrote in, pre-birth. As a result, she got a letter from the people that determine if you're disabled, and they said, Andrea, we know you have no vision, we know you have no light perception, but we don't consider you disabled. Luckily, she was hired by Sears just before she got that letter. She never did get access, which I think is for poor people. So anyway, she's happily employed now for Citigroup, and she is in the middle class. She makes enough money that she pays taxes, and she doesn't get it all back in rebates. So I want to just remind you that sometimes preborn children are children, and she was a child in January. She was counted in the 1980 census.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
So anyway.
Paul Parisi. Paul Parisi.
Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, I'm Paul Parisi. I'm representing For Tucson. We're a nonprofit here in Tucson that's trying to find biblical solutions to solve community problems. Right now we're working on a poverty reduction task force and an economic opportunity development task force, primarily in the Anfi neighborhood. We're trying to be community partners with you. But I have something, every year we do a blessing for first responders and elected officials. This is the 8th year in a row, and I personally want to invite you to attend. Please save the date, January 27th, and it's going to be at the El Conquistador Hotel. And I really like you there, because what we do, we ask for God's blessing on you. And the reason we do is because we want you to make decisions that please God. And that's a very difficult thing when you're, and I know the position you're in. I've been an elected official myself, and sometimes it's gut-wrenching. But right now you have on your agenda executive session, and the item is reproductive rights. On July 5th, you passed a resolution declaring support for access for reproductive health care, including legal, safe abortion. Well, in lieu of the current law, I urge you to work with other community partners that are in place right now, mainly these pregnancy centers that just provide wonderful care for women. They help families. They help people with parenting skills. They give women all sorts of ways to have live birth. And right now, there's so many families begging for children to raise, and adoption is something. These are something in place right now under the current laws, and if you utilize those services right now and increase your partnership with the pregnancy centers, women will be helped. And I thank you for what you do. I know that a lot of times it's a thankless job, but it's so important. And right now, I just urge you to work with all the community partners to help this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Caswell. Cheryl Caswell.
Madam Chairman, Supervisors, I am here to represent the Pima County Republicans as the third Vice Chairman of the Pima County Republican Party. I also represent all poll workers for the Pima County elections and the City of Tucson elections, as I've been instrumental in getting volunteers, training people, and making sure that we get mobilized and get the proper oversight. I am also an inspector of a voting center. My voting center is the American Legion 109 at Heaton Sarita Road. That voting center was closed 1 week prior to the elections, except on election day at the alternative location I was scheduled for, Cottonwood Elementary School. I began receiving phone calls from the Pima County Elections Department claiming my voting center was closed. Why? Because you failed to notify the public that that voting center had been closed and an alternative location was open. And so your elections department forgot that we were moved and assumed that I had been closed and no longer taking voters. We were open and we were accepting voters. On top of that, we didn't have the proper materials. So for 20 minutes, we could not issue any provisional ballots, any conditional ballots, and we did not have the proper affidavit envelopes for any of the early ballots that were received. On top of that, me and the marshal and the equipment specialist remained an additional 2 hours at our voting center because the Pima County Elections Department forgot about our voting center, and there was no proper chain of custody for my ballots. We refused to leave the voting center until a Pima County sheriff arrived by 9 o'clock that night. Me and my workers arrived the day before, set up. We set up the entire process. We tested everything. We went through training, and we spent 14 hours working for the Pima County elections that day. How do I get people to work elections when you do not timely manage or manage our time effectively? And you have us waiting there 2 hours to establish a chain of custody for our ballots. Recently, I just attended new training. You're adding a new item of equipment. It's a thermal printer. Jesus, when asked, what is the redundant system for the failure of that thermal printer to print a ballot ID slip? I was instructed to use a scrap of paper to give as a ballot ID slip to the judge to issue a printed ballot. And why am I being instructed that the ballot will print first before a ballot ID slip is printed for the judge of the same party to verify the ballot as it is handed to the voter? On top of that, we now have no longer one ballot, one vote.
Thank you. Yolanda Trosper. Yolanda?
Hello. Thank you for your time. Everything I was going to touch on has been said already, most of it. I agree 100%. I just wanted to thank you for your time and your service to our county. Today, I came to respectfully ask that you please review our election process and the vulnerability and the lack of trust that we have in it due to the vulnerability. I have a recent conversation with my now voting age student or child. Brought me to your website, to the Secretary of State's website, and to further review Pima County. I was not able to find certification at azsos.gov for the 2020 election here in Pima County. It's not listed on there on the website. I tried, maybe it's printed out wrong or it's missing, I don't know, but it's not there. That presents vulnerability and concern for all voters. When my son asked me, will my vote count? What is the point of it? This is where we come to. No matter what side of the aisle you are on, there's vulnerability, there's lack of trust from your community in your voting system. For that reason, I ask that we please reconsider how you are going to hold your elections this coming election and in the future, that we reconsider using hand counting and paper ballots to ensure that when we say this is what I'm voting for, that's what it is, and there's no chance that it can be changed. I ask that you be the peacemakers of our time. I say that because I see a lot of our issues are based on what people believe and what other people see as different view. I don't know who's right or wrong, but I do know the only way to eliminate the issue is to eliminate the problem, and that is machines being used for the election.
Yes, yes.
So again, I ask that you please be the peacemakers of our time and restore the trust voters have in the election process. Everyone wants the win. All we are asking is that you do it with integrity.
Thank you. Penelope Jacks. Penelope Jacks.
And now for something entirely different. My name is Penelope Jacks. I'm the co-chair with Steve Lynn of the Preschool Promise Coalition. And I'm here to thank you guys today on behalf of the 856 kids who were able to attend high-quality preschool in this past year, in the first year of your investment in PEEPS. Kids have been in a variety of settings all over Tucson and all over the county. the state, Tucson, other cities in the county, public schools, not-for-profits, and individuals have all contributed financially and in kind and in time to make this project work so well. Excuse me. I know that there were many questions about whether and if the program would work. And it's especially gratifying to be here to tell you your investment has paid off. It's working beautifully, even with all the challenges that we had with COVID. The success, in part, is due to the really wonderful commitment and effort and talent of county administrators. And so I especially thank them as well as you. As you begin to consider your budget for the coming fiscal year, I just encourage you to continue your commitment to children, to families, and to the continuing prosperity of our community by supporting high-quality early education. Thank you, guys. Well done.
Thank you. Christine Boserman? Well, we're done then. We have no...
You guys train her properly? Supposed to have latex gloves.
Hello, I'm Christine Boserman. So I kind of want to start this. I am a solutions person. I'm not a machine conspiracy theorist in any way at all, but we do have problems here, all right? We have a new system has been installed in Pima County, and you've failed on every deliverable. I said this last time. Installation, training, logistics, operations, final reports. I do have a report for you guys with numbers and with the statutes that you have violated. At one of your last meetings, Elections Director Constance said she didn't know of any violations. 16184B is a Class 2 misdemeanor for any of you election officers not to follow every word of Chapter 16, which is elections. And that everything in here is listed in there. So we've had a historic turnout combined with a lack of experience and expertise and a disturbing lack of understanding of terminologies in our systems have contributed to this failure. The reasons we have elections is no longer seems to be our focus on guaranteeing U.S. citizens the right to vote and it's become decreasing provisional ballots and voter convenience. And the chain of custody and our votes have suffered in this cycle. A complex, complicated enterprise-level system combined with a distributed database software system that only one man can be found to maintain in all of Arizona, combined with you have 129 brand new mini systems. A system is any system, but you have a router, a printer, and tablets in every voting center location, and now you've added understaffed and knowledgeable on how to train and run our elections. Simply put, everyone was so busy trying to figure out how to fight fires and get the tablets and printer works, they ignored the ballots, and the election integrity has suffered for that. So you've lost chain of custody on an entire ballot. You have brand new laws. You have a lot of brand new laws that now you have to learn and do. And I want to hit some of these so that you really pay attention to them. My number one thing, if you remember, was inspectors, marshals, and judges have to be in these early voting locations. I don't know why the recorder's office, as they've added voting, because they originally didn't, don't have to follow that law. That's 16531. 16551B is a new law. Early voting locations must consist of those things, so you have to add those. Another thing that has been added is 16446B. Everything has to be durable, accurate, and efficient. Printers breaking down are not durable. You have to treat the all these systems as electronic tabulation machines. So you have to have an accuracy test like you do on the big tabulation machine in every single one of these 129. So I really hope you do 2 opposing parties at each system. And I hope you do a paper ballot. Just do a paper backup. I mean, you could have had on the wall 129 locations and marked them off and seen 2 were missing. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our call to the public. concluded call to the public, and we now will move into executive session. Item 2 on the addendum agenda, pursuant to ARS 38431.03A3. I'll move to convene an exec.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion, any objections? Hearing none, we'll convene an exec, and after exec, we'll take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene in regular session at the sound of the gavel. let the record show we are back in regular session. We had one executive session item. It was for information only. So we now are going to move a little bit out of sequence, moving on to item 16 on our regular agenda and item 3 on the addendum agenda. Item 16 is 2022 primary election after action report. Turn it over to Ms. Hargrove.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Supervisors. Thank you for having me back one more time. And I did go through the after action report, and at the EIC meeting, they did not have a lot of recommendations. They did have a few recommendations that we will not be able to implement for the November general election, but definitely something that I will take a look at the feasibility of those items and bring those back to you at a future time. As I stated in the after action report, and as has been stated by many individuals that have spoken, that training definitely is an issue that we need to address for the general election, and we are already in the process of addressing that issue now, especially with reducing the class sizes for the poll workers. So training, we're already in the process of testing the equipment, preparing it to go out to the vote centers, and the provisional ballot envelope issue has been resolved. Those provisional ballot envelopes are already packed and ready to go, and anything that we need to send out to the vote centers we already have, and they are ready to go. Except for we still are waiting for arrival of the thermal printers because they had a hurricane in Florida where the vendor is located, and so that shipment did not arrive at the end of the month as we expected, but it should arrive soon. And I am happy to answer any questions that you may have about the after action report.
Any questions from board members?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Christie.
Good morning, Ms. Hargrove, Director Hargrove. Good to see you.
Good morning.
I have a number of questions regarding your after-action report, and some of them go back to when we first discussed this, when the after-action report came up, and you were going to be able to, you at that time indicated that you would look into some certain issues and get back to us. I think one thing that can best be addressed at this particular point that might take care of some of our previous concerns. Can you tell us what are the changes in the election laws that have gone into effect since the primary election?
Yes, sir. Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie. The primary change in the election law is surrounds the provisional ballots. And prior to the legislator passing the bill in the session this year, we had to issue a provisional ballot to anyone who was issued an early ballot. That has changed. So if the individuals were simply issued a provisional ballot, an early ballot, we no longer have to issue them a provisional ballot because we do have electronic poll books in our vote centers.
So what do you do with the provisional ballot if you don't have to replace it?
The early ballot?
Yes.
So the early ballots, if they bring the early ballot into the vote center, we spoil the early ballot if they surrender it. So we spoil the early ballot. It gets returned with the other ballots in the official envelope. And we then process them like a regular voter, check them in, and issue them a ballot.
Okay. So if you drop off a mailed-in ballot on Election Day, when does that get processed?
Do you want me to take that? If a mail-in ballot is dropped off at the vote center, we count those ballots at the end of the night, and we prepare them to transfer chain of custody to the recorder's office. And then the recorder then goes through their process of signature verification and verification of the voting rolls that occurred on election day. So if anybody has cast a ballot on election day, they verify that information, and then the early ballots are certified and then transferred back to our office.
So what you're saying today is that if you drop off a mailed-in ballot on election day, it gets processed that day?
It is not processed that day, no, sir.
It is counted but not processed.
I'm sorry, let me clarify that. So they physically count the number of early ballots that we receive in the vote center. But we do not open them and process them in any other way. We simply count them to verify how many we have, to make sure that when we transfer chain of custody to the recorder's office, we know how many we're transferring to them.
Okay, so they're counted as a mail-in ballot?
Yes.
But you don't know what the contents of that ballot are?
That is correct.
And at what point, generally speaking, do you?
Supervisor Christie, I think that a little bit of confusion when she says that they're counting the ballots, they're just confirming the number that they have. They are not opened, they're not processed. We do not begin processing mail ballots until after the election file has been uploaded. And so we've seen who has voted. Anybody who then, if there's an additional ballot for that same person, number one, we won't be able to count that second ballot, and they will be referred to the county administrator or county attorney's office for double voting. So we stop all production. We do not process anything after, I believe, 6 o'clock the night prior to Election Day. On Election Day, we absolutely do not do any processing of ballots, and then we do not continue processing until we've received the voter file from the elections department, at which point we would know who already cast a ballot.
But I think that usually previous elections, it's about 10 days before we actually, by the time you process, do signature verification, and then they are counted. There's about a lapse of 10 days. Or at least that in prior elections, that's been the case.
Thank you, Chair Bronson. Supervisor Christie, I can answer that question a little bit more in depth. The process for early ballots, when they are returned to a vote center and returned to our office for signature verification, we will not start that process until the recorder indicated that we have the vote file. So the vote file is the file of every person who cast a vote in person on Election Day. That is what gives them the credit for their voting history. Once that file is uploaded, our staff continues to review and process all of the early ballots that we received in the mail or that were dropped off by voters at vote centers. That process of doing the signature verification comes in batches. So Chair Bronson, you are correct. For the primary, it was 10 days to get that final numbers that the elections department provided to meet the canvass. For the general election, it'll be extended out to 20 days. Within that time frame, we will be processing all of the ballots that are in our custody. So anything that was received by our office at 7 p.m. on Election Day or received by the elections department by 7 p.m. The batches that we're referring to after signature verification, every single early ballot that comes in, once it's gone through signature verification, we turn them over to the elections department in batches of 5,000. So at every 5,000, we stop our process, we do a batch turnover to the elections department. That batch is received by the elections department. The elections department then works through their process of the early boards reviewing and opening those early ballots for tabulation. Does that clarify your question?
Yeah, and we're expecting if we have above normal turnout, that means the time frame gets probably extended beyond 10 days.
We have a statutory deadline to provide a canvas to the Board of Supervisors for consideration and adoption. So our staffing will meet that canvassing deadline, which means that after Election Day, we will be working very long hours. So our staff will come in early, our staff will go late.
And what is that deadline? What is the drop dead date?
For the general, I believe it's 20 days out, but Constance
That sounds about right.
Yeah. November 22nd is what I'm being told.
November 22nd.
November 22nd is when the board will meet to adopt the canvas.
Madam Chair, and this could be directed to either department, are mailed-in ballots counted before or after provisional ballots?
The signature verification occurs first on all of the ballots that were returned via mail, so early ballots that are in our custody will receive the signature verification first. Once we are done with the verification of all of those ballots, then we start the verification process of the provisional ballots. Supervisor Christie.
Okay, and moving over to the election staff, and I'm referring to Director Hargrove's after-action report. It's one of her statements is, election staff is currently reviewing poll worker assignments at all vote centers to ensure an equitable distribution of workers from the two major political parties. What is, first of all, equitable versus equal, and what does the law stipulate on that?
Thank you for that question, Supervisor Christie. So the law actually states, first, the election board by statute is the inspector, the marshal, and the judges. That's the election board, and then we can have as many clerks as necessary. When I say equitable distribution, that means that the clerks do not necessarily have to be of one political party or another, but the inspector, the marshal, and the judges do. And in Pima County, once we adopted the electronic poll books, the statute only requires 2 judges in each location. When we adopted the electronic poll books, I made a determination that I would have 2 judges for each station that had an electronic poll book. So we have more than 2 judges of each party, Democrat, Republican, in our vote centers. And so what we are attempting to do for the majority of the vote centers, we will be absolutely fine. We would be able to meet every criteria that is necessary. But for some of the outlying vote centers, getting an equitable distribution of officers is what we're aiming for. So that could possibly be 2 Republicans and maybe 3 Democrats or 4 Democrats if we needed to have a clerk, because we cannot find anyone to actually go to those vote centers.
Okay, and along those lines, you also state each vote center had a sufficient number of poll workers, but some did not have equitable party representation.
Yes, sir, Supervisor Christie. Those are the vote centers that you identified when you read them off that had either all Democrat or all Republican poll workers. So those were the ones that did not have an equitable distribution.
So again, bodies there,
yes.
Bodies there are one thing. Equal party representation is another. And again, if we could get an update on your actions or your activities to have the equal number, and again, a reference to what does the law state?
Supervisor Christie, the Elections Procedures Manual does state that if it is not possible to have equal representation, then you can have equitable representation in vote centers or polling places. And that is actually what the EPM actually states as well. But we are still working on that. I have prepared at a point in time, we pull the report for the Board of Supervisors to approve at the next board meeting. So you will have that information at the October 18th board meeting.
And again, that will reflect what?
That will reflect where we were last Friday in making these vote centers have equal representation. But we are still working. We have not stopped working. So I could definitely provide an update to that report that was already submitted so that you can see where we are. And I am working with the Republican Party. We are trying to work out some way for individuals to actually go out to cells. We have to get permission.
Excuse me, is cells the only?
That's the main area where we have
the main area
problems.
But there
yes,
are
sir.
other unequal centers.
Yes, sir. There are a few others.
Okay.
But those we should be able to take care of. Cells is the one that we're having the most problems with, and we have been asked. We have a couple of volunteers that want to work that are Republicans, but we have to get permission from the nation to allow them to park their RV out there so that they're not driving for hours in the morning.
But we do acknowledge that cells is not the only area where we have this issue.
Not currently, no, sir.
Okay. Going to the responses, your responses in your report to the Elections Integrity Commission, one of your bullet points says the suggestion was to hire a project manager/leader, and your response to that was, we now have a project manager from Tenex Software Solutions as of September 12th. The project manager coordinates with the recorder's office. Madam Director, who is paying the salary of this individual?
Supervisor Christie, Tenex is paying the salary of that individual.
So we have a vendor being paid by the vendor to be the county's project manager. Isn't that akin to the fox guarding the hen house?
Supervisor Christie, they should have provided a project manager from the very beginning, and they did not. So actually what they're providing is what we should have had all along. We do not have, of course, we could hire at some point, but a project manager, but we do not have a project manager in-house right now that can handle that.
Wouldn't that be the safer and more logical direction, is to hire somebody in-house who's an employee of the department that would be the project manager, whose job is determined to make the vendor do its job and to keep to the terms of the contract. But here you've got Tenex who could just raise their arms and say, it's not our fault, we're just the vendor. That, I think, is a very distinct issue that I think needs to be addressed. You can't have the company that is providing the voting machines have as your project lead manager an employee of those voting machine companies. Do you see that?
Yes, sir, Supervisor Christie, I do. It's two distinct things. So we would need their project manager as well because we have to coordinate with them. But yes, absolutely, I absolutely agree. I would love to have and hire a project manager.
Is that a possibility that may happen?
For the general election?
Yes.
No, sir. It's not enough time to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, as we talked before, Madam Director, what are the laws and penalties about not attaining, quote, equitable party representation, and who is it that generates these laws?
Supervisor Christie, the laws are in the statutes. There are no specific laws that deal directly with poll worker equitable distribution. The laws are general, so basically the law states that if I do not do my job, and I willingly do not do my job, then that is a misdemeanor, and there's also a felony that can apply to that.
And this is the thing that's troubling to me, and you could give me clarity on this, is that if you look at Arizona Revised Statutes 16-531, appointment of election boards qualifications, when an election is ordered and not less than 20 days before a general or primary election, the Board of Supervisors shall appoint for each election precinct, voting center, or other voting location, 1 inspector, 1 marshal, 2 judges, and as many clerks of election as deemed necessary. It seems to me it's not you or the department that's on the hook for not complying with this Arizona Revised Statutes. It's this Board of Supervisors. And would you agree with that?
If I may, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, there is an agenda item on the board agenda for the next meeting. That is the list of all of those election workers and the individuals that you've just named for approval and ratification by the board. And it's at that time you'll be able to see exactly what is the equitable or equal distribution of all of the judges and the various poll workers at each of the sites.
So that would be in compliance with this revised statute?
Yes, sir.
And just to reiterate, it says, if they are members of the 2 political parties that cast the highest number of votes in the state at the last preceding general election, they shall be divided equally between the 2 parties.
Again, thank you. Chair Bronson and Supervisor Christie, again, you will be able to see the list next week. And as, once again, Director Hargrove has been working, I've been in the meetings with representatives of the various parties to make sure that we have access to all of the individuals we can need to staff those, to staff the required positions. And you'll be able to verify that seeing the list at the next meeting.
And 3 quick last questions. And just to clarify it and get it out into the open here so it can be addressed and either put to rest or put aside, is it true that an elections voting center inspector took home a box of cast ballots after the polls closed?
Supervisor Christie, I did, the speaker earlier, I did speak with him after the election, and he indeed did take the ballots home. He said he lived across the street from the vote center, and he did take the ballots home for the sheriff to pick up.
And what is your estimation of that?
That was not proper, and I did tell him that you know, he did maintain chain of custody, but the other individual should have remained with him with the ballots if he was going to do that.
When were they returned to the proper destination?
Election night.
Okay, and I'm assuming steps have been made that won't occur again.
Yes, sir. Steps have been made that would not occur again. He did contact me, and we did have a long conversation about the inspector.
And can you address the other issue regarding what we heard earlier about machine accreditation and certification?
No, sir, I am not prepared to address that, but I know that the voting equipment is certified and that the Secretary of State provides the certification for the any equipment that is used in Arizona. So if it is used in Arizona, it has been approved by the Secretary of State.
I'll make a real ending comment here, but the last question is I think, a good one. That we have from our own sources. There was at one time, we were talking about testing, and that folks went through the training, but they were not tested after the training to see if they understood what they were trained upon. And we were informed that there was at one time an online testing system post-election. I'm sorry, post-training. Are you aware of that ability that we could test the folks after training online?
Supervisor Christie, I am not aware of that. I am aware that at some point about 10 years ago that there was a certification training that was held in Pima County.
Online?
I doubt if it was online, no, sir. It was in person. It was an 8-hour class, and the statutes state that if that class is given and you have the certification, that they do have to be tested, but the statutes do not require testing of any other poll workers.
Would that not be the proper and expeditious thing to do?
Oh, absolutely, yes, sir. I believe that is a great thing to do.
Well, just to summarize, there are a number of issues we talked about the what we just talked about with the testing, about the machine accreditation and certification, about the project leads manager being of the same employment with the ownership or the branding of the machines with 10X. These are the types of issues, and I'll be very blunt, drive my side of the aisle crazy and get them all riled up, and understandably so. And our whole goal here, and my whole goal here, is not to pull the rug out from anybody or to make a statement about any kind of voting system. All we want is fair and clean elections. And if these issues don't go addressed, and if these issues aren't either resolved one way or another to everybody's satisfaction, we're going to have the same cycle of conspiracy theories, lack of confidence, distrust, and it's imperative that these issues be taken seriously and addressed. And I implore you to do that as soon as you can, sooner rather than later. And with that, Madam Chair, thank you for allowing me.
Thank you. Any other questions for
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Christie? Supervisor Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Hargrove, on page 10 of the memorandum that we received on September 16th, you noted that elections did not have an established protocol for technical support calls during the primary. Skipping a couple of sentences, you then said the influx of calls and the lack of protocol led to long waits and frustrations for some callers. Some vote centers called multiple times while waiting on supplies or support to arrive. And then in the memorandum that we received 13 days later, you said under communication on page 2, the Elections Department will add additional troubleshooters to address vote center calls on election day. The call center has 2 divisions to handle equipment and supply and procedural problems. The separation will reduce the response time to anyone experiencing a critical problem on election day. The elections department is also hiring additional intermittent employees to help answer calls from poll workers before and on election day. The distribution of responsibilities and the expanded call center will ensure faster response times to address voter needs. So other than the equipment and supply and procedural problems, what sort of calls did we get during the primary that weren't answered quickly enough, and how are these new procedures helping to address that?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Scott, they were the same problems: equipment, supplies, maybe voter problems, not understanding how to assist a voter. But the problem was when you have equipment problems and someone stays on the phone for a long time, that it takes up time and staff away from other questions and issues that can be resolved very quickly. And so, to me, in my opinion, it created a longer wait time than the vote center should have had to wait for, as well as the voters. I wouldn't want anyone to have to wait more than 20 minutes for us to get something out to them. An hour, 2 hours is extremely way too long.
So by segregating the equipment and supply and procedural problems into those 2 divisions, your anticipation is that will free up the other people in the call center to take all the other calls?
Supervisor Scott, yes, that is correct.
Okay. Another question that I had is that one of the election Integrity Commission commissioners, Mr. Hurley, who I believe is Supervisor Christie's appointee, recommends testing the e-poll books and printer connections on election morning and the night before. You said that you accept Commissioner Hurley's recommendation and will incorporate it into the procedures for the general election. What was it about that recommendation that resonated with you?
Supervisor Scott, it makes sense because something could happen overnight. Somebody can kick a cord out, they can disconnect the router. If the router is not connected first, then the printer is not going to work, and then the poll books will not connect properly. So there is a method of connecting the equipment that has to be followed. And if for any reason that is disturbed, it is possible that it will not connect and print properly the next day.
Got it. And I had just one other question, Madam Chair, and this has been brought up both today and previously, I think in our last meeting, and you reference it in your September 29th memo, Delta file monitoring. It was brought up today. It was brought up to the last meeting by the same speaker. The Elections Department will assign a dedicated individual to monitor vote center connectivity on Election Day. The individual will also monitor Delta file downloads to ensure all vote centers stay current throughout the day. And skipping down, trainings will instruct poll workers to wake up the touchpads to ensure continuous file downloads periodically. Monitoring Delta files and sideways communication is a priority for Election Day. What I want to ask is, you addressed this issue at our last meeting. What do we know more about with regard to Delta file monitoring? And just for my own knowledge and edification, what is sideways communication?
Supervisor Scott, I'll answer the last one first. Sideways communication, it is a term that the vendors use for their technology and their equipment, and it simply means that the touchpads are speaking to each other in the vote center. So they're communicating sideways as opposed to up and down. Okay. So that's the sideways communication. To monitoring of the touchpads, Precinct Central is the database that we use that we can actually monitor these touchpads. So we can see each touchpad, and we can see where they are with Delta file downloads. And we can monitor that during the day. So the goal is Monday night, when they go in to do their Monday night setup, when they turn on their touchpads, they will download as many of those Delta files, and possibly all of them because it should be less, to the touchpad. So Tuesday morning, there is nothing to download. So when we start processing Tuesday morning, everyone should begin with the same number of Delta file downloads on their touchpads, and we can see that real time in the office. And as they start processing, we can see that Delta files are being created, and then we can also see when they are then downloaded to each touchpad. So having someone to monitor that, to make sure if for some reason someone's touchpad goes to sleep, it goes offline, that they get it back online and get the Delta files downloaded for when they do need to use it, because there are some that will be sitting idle most of the day. But those that are functioning and working all day long, they're pretty good. They will have their Delta files downloaded. But the others, we just need to ensure that they do have theirs downloaded, and that may require waking them up.
So the only other thing and this is not a question but a request, is that your September 29th memorandum addressed 3 common themes that you got from both looking at the after-action analysis and also the feedback from the Election Integrity Commission. One was confusion about the process, second was confusion about the technology, and third was confusion about inventory, where to find items and supplies. If I could request that the after-action report after the general election address how we did with those 3 areas of focus, I'd appreciate it. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, then let's move on to the addendum agenda item number 3. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Recorder, if I could ask you the same question just to hear your version or any kind of changes or different directions about what you feel and what you perceive from the Recorder's Office, any changes in current election laws that have gone into effect since the primary election.
No, we don't have any that are directly impacting any way that we are facilitating this election. There have been a number of bills that won't go into effect until after January, and therefore we're fine to continue. The only bill that we're that has changed is, and I'm forgetting the bill number off the top of my head, so that we can change the way that provisionals are processed. And that, of course, is an asset. It's a positive change where we will no longer be required to issue provisional ballots to anyone who has already received a mail ballot. So
nothing significant is
Senate Bill 1460
impacting the Recorder's Office.
Not that I'm aware of. Not for this cycle in particular. Again, anything that is going to affect will go in after the start of the year.
After the
first of the year.
Okay, thank you. Going to your after actions report regarding staffing, you say, and I quote, "Staffing was sufficient in most operational areas, but overall lean. Some early voting sites were nominally staffed with the bare minimum for party balance." So my question there is, were the parties balanced?
Yes.
They were balanced. On the staffing overview, we have 14 permanent and 113 intermittent employees. So if you total those, the 113 intermittent and the 14 permanent staff, do they need to be party balanced?
They are.
They are party balanced. Okay. And then on, still on your after action report, you moved the Recorder's Office for early voting to another location, and you stipulate that the even though it was one of the busiest offices in 2020, a replacement site was found less than a mile away that is larger in capacity and easy to access. So you moved that location because it wasn't big enough. It didn't handle the volume. And deeper in your report, along those same lines, you state that given that many of the early voting centers were physically too small to comfortably accommodate party observers, as well as early voting staff and the voting public, the Recorder followed the prior practice of not allowing political party observers at sites. My question is, you were willing to accommodate the Recorder's Office because it was too small, but you would not allow political party observers in numerous other sites because they were too small, but you enlarged the Recorder's Office before you signed up for new early voting sites. Why didn't you make sure that they could accommodate political party observers? And in addition to this, you state that the practice, there was an early practice of not allowing political party observers, and that you merely followed an earlier practice. Practice is one thing. What's the law?
The law is I'm not required to allow political party observers at an early voting site.
That is the law?
Yes. So we have cleared that with legal. We have confirmed that is accurate. So we do allow for political party observers at our ballot processing facility, and that is a courtesy. That is something that we can manage there, and so we do. The process for finding locations, you have to keep in mind that unlike the elections department, which is only open election day, which means it's close to the public, we are requesting locations that could be open for 27 days. That's a very long time for locations to churches, schools, libraries, to dedicate a loss of that space to anything other than elections. And so we had great difficulty finding a location that was suitable, that was large enough, that had a large enough parking lot, that was ADA accessible. We spent a great deal of time looking for a location that was suitable for replacement for the early voting site. We did not get a request from again, the process took months. We did not get a request for party observers until literally the day before early voting was set to start. So at which point we could not change. We do have contracts in place. We've spent a lot of man hours searching for locations that were suitable. That's not a change that we can make in a quick turnaround. In addition, when we're talking about party observers, we have to recognize that there are 3 political parties that are certified in the state of Arizona: Republican, Democratic, Libertarian, which would mean that if we are allowing for one political party, we have to allow for all parties. So that's an additional 3 people plus an additional person to ensure that they can comply with the with any type of direction that they're given, which would be 4 additional people in that location. So that is a really big, drastic change from what we prepared for, because we were following the practice of only allowing observers at our ballot processing facility, which we were happy to do. We had a great number of people. I personally welcomed them, shook hands anytime I saw somebody there, and thanked them for allowing our staff to do additional work. The additional concern, though, is that with added people are added concerns for that location. And so even just at our ballot processing center, one of the things that I mentioned is, an observer bringing a set of binoculars to watch as my staff members work. I talked about the invasion of personal space or making staff members feel uncomfortable. What they're doing is very important, critical work on behalf of our entire community. They need to be able to focus and maintain their concentration. And so even within that location, we're struggling to maintain that relationship, because many people, despite having training outside through their party, and despite having received the notifications and the policies and procedures of our location and have been given repeated warnings, will continue to abuse that status as an observer. And so it is not simply something that we can change within a very short period of time, and therefore I stand by my decision to only allow political observers at the ballot processing center, where I do have a full-time manager, supervisor, and people, permanent staff who are working there, who are able to relay any concerns quickly.
Okay, so this is the issue. You, in one moment, you say that you could not accommodate the volume at the recorder's office, so you found a larger facility that could accommodate the volume that the recorder's office had. Then in the next sentence, you say that the reason why you barred party observers at the early voting sites was there was not enough room to accommodate them. So that kind of conflicts right there. If you can do it for one reason, it would seem to me that you ought to be able to do the other. But I guess the underlying issue here is, even if you had all the early voting centers with full space, adequate space, would you allow party poll observers in those large accessible spaces?
Not at this time.
And it's not due to space?
You asked about spacing. You asked two questions at once, and I think we are conflating the two. One, we did change the early voting site at the east side, which the east side recorder's office has room for 5 staff members. It is a very small location. It's located in the same courtyard as Pima County Health Department. It is difficult to navigate in and out and to have a nice flow for the volume of traffic. That was the need that was identified very early on. That was our most popular site in the previous election. And when we first began looking for locations, the concern was the volume of people. We looked at many locations within that same area, not wanting to make a huge change for the community because that is a well-established location, and we knew that we were going to be challenged with communicating the change to the voters because they are accustomed to voting in that location. And so that was the concern that we made months prior, and the observation request was not part of that decision-making process because we did not plan, and we didn't have political observers in that location. And again, the request for that was only made just a day before early voting. And so those are two separate questions that you're asking me. The first question, why did I move that to allow for increased volume? The second question is about observers, and I believe I've answered that question.
And just to reiterate that if all the early voting centers had ample space and you did not care about prior practice, you would not allow political party observers under any circumstances.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. If all of the early voting centers had adequate space for all kinds of observers or people or poll workers, A, and if you didn't really care about prior practice of not having poll observers because your predecessors didn't do it, under no circumstances would you ever have observers of different political parties.
Our political observers are staff members. So we maintain a party balance. You will see our staff members wearing differently colored lanyards. That indicates which party they belong to, and anytime we are doing anything with ballots, we ensure that we have people of opposite party handling those ballots.
But not observers?
No.
And if there was plenty of space for them?
I have concerns that I've shared within my report about some of the
So those
the
concerns
needs.
aren't prior practice or space. Those are separate concerns.
It is a spacing issue as well. Our downtown facility, which is our office. It's a working office. We allow people to vote in the lobby, and we hold early voting right there in a working lobby in the middle of the recorder's office and shared lobby with the assessor's office.
Would I be safe in assuming that your short answer would be no?
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the recorder?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Scott.
Thank you. I don't have a question. I just wanted to recommend that any member of the community that has a question about ballot chain of custody procedures, which is a matter that we hear raised frequently in the community with regard to early ballots, and you break them down in your report into 3 categories: those issued at early voting sites, received by mail, or dropped off at any early voting location or vote center. I would encourage any member of the community to look at those ballot chain of custody procedures to see how the verification of affidavit signatures and other steps are taken. And I gather, Madam Recorder, that all of those procedures are aligned with both state statute and the aforementioned election procedures manual.
That is correct.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, any further questions?
Chair Bronson.
Supervisor
Not really a
Grijalva.
question. I just wanted to thank the Elections Office and the Recorder's Office for coming repeatedly. I think this is 4th or 5th time that you've been asked to come, and the questions seem very similar. I think the answers have continued to be consistent. I appreciate that it's also documented, and this after action report is also attached to the agenda, and so I just appreciate your transparency in making sure that everyone that keeps asking continues to get the same answer repeatedly. Thank you very much.
All right, if there are no further questions, we're going to move up back to the regular agenda in order. And now we are the Board of Supervisors sitting as other boards, Flood Control District Board, it's Riparian Habitat Mitigation. Item 8, I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, objections, hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to Library District Board, items 9 and 10 and 11. I'll move those items.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor.
could we deal with item 11 individually?
All right, I'll withdraw my motion, and I'll move items 9 and 10.
I'll second. Thank you.
Motion and a second. Discussion, objections, hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 11, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
I'd just like some clarification on this amendment of award. It's to provide for point-of-sale and online payment solutions in our library district. And this amendment extends the termination date to November 16th of 23. And it's to have a contract with a company that will provide the point-of-sale and online payment solutions. And this is for our library district operations fund. My questions are libraries accepting fees and charging fines?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, libraries certainly are accepting fines and charging fees when appropriate, as per BOS action.
There was, I'm recalling something about all fees and all charges were removed and suspended. Did that change? Or was it ever in
Chair
place?
Bronson, Supervisor Christie, the board allowed the library to take certain steps to mitigate outstanding fines. So yes, some that were historical and fines that had been accumulated have been forgiven. That process has taken place. However, this is for new fines and fees.
So they are existent?
Yes, they are.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all the questions I have.
All right. Any further discussion? Objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to the consent calendar. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Scott.
could we please consider items number 2 and number 5 separately?
2 and 5. All right.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Christie.
could we please consider items 11, 12, 13, 15, 24, and 28 separately?
All right. If there are no other...
Chair Bronson.
Okay.
We just take all of the items off the consent. It looks like 16 and 17, please.
16 and 17. Okay. All right. I'll move the remainder of consent in its entirety.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections? Moving on to item 2, NAFCare. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second.
That was me.
Okay. Any, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Just had a question for Dr. Garcia, and this is, Dr. Garcia, based on what I read in Exhibit A, scope of services for the Pima County Adult Detention Complex. If you go down to 2.4, it mentions our accreditation by the National Commission on Correctional Health Care, and that current accreditation expires in October of 2023. But what really caught my eye was 2.4.1 that says, at its sole discretion and at its own cost, county may perform or cause to be performed a simulated National Commission on Correctional Health Care accreditation survey or surveys. Contractor must cooperate in such simulated surveys and must correct any and all deficiencies noted therein within 30 days of receipt of notice from county of such deficiencies. My question is that standard language, or did we have any concerns with regard to this contractor that caused us to insert that language?
Yeah. Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, that's an excellent question, and thank you for catching that. We've actually built that into our last 5 contracts, precisely because the accreditation, the health accreditation of both our juvenile and adult detention facilities are so critical in terms of maintaining the health of that detained population. So we've actually built in simulations done by outside consultants. We just completed one, and it gave us some really good feedback that places us in a very good position to be able to go through the national accreditation process and be successful. We believe that that is a critical seal of approval in terms of the quality of the services that are being provided in those facilities.
So it's not only informative for the contractor in terms of the execution of their responsibilities, but it's helpful to us in terms of the information that we get from those simulations.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, you are correct.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. I need to, item 1, that was Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System. I have a note that says Supervisor Hines has a conflict. Supervisor Hines, is that accurate? Supervisor Hines, are you with us? Okay. Then I'm assuming you didn't vote on that item, so it carried 4-0. All right, moving on to item 5, Cody Foundation. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. That was
me.
That was you again.
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. Thank you. And I wanted to direct this question to Mr. Brown, if I could. Under program goals, predicted outcome, it says to provide staffs, goods, and services for the specialty court programs in Pima County. The primary focus of this contract is for contractor to provide employment support, vocational training, and job coaching for participants in a participating court of the Pima County Specialty Courts Initiative, primarily the Drug Treatment Alternative to Prison, AK DTAP program, in the form of the staff for the provision of these services. I just wanted to make a simple request, is that I would really like a report to the board on the extent and scope of the Specialty Courts Initiative, and perhaps especially this DTAP program, because I don't know much about it. I'm very much intrigued by it, especially when I look at the public benefit and the metrics available to measure performance. But that would really be appreciated if you could pass that request on to Ms. Conover, Mr. Brown.
Supervisor Bronson, Supervisor Scott, we will do.
Thank you very much.
All right, if there's no further discussion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 11, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second, and I think you pulled that item.
I did, Madam Chair. Thank you. I'm pulling this for two reasons. One is to basically make sure that the public remains informed about how much money they have been paying and how much money they are now going to be paying to provide food for asylum seekers. 2 meetings ago on August 15th, the amendment for providing food for asylum seekers increased $1.4 million to an aggregate total of $2.3 million. Now, in this agenda item, we're adding approximately $4.4 million more, totaling a cumulative amount of $6.7 million. First question is, this amendment expires January 20th of 23. It's not the end of the calendar year. It's not the end of the fiscal year. Why is it ending in such an odd date of January 20th, 23?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, this is all, again, the receipt of federal money and then how we pass through in these contracts. The exact terms of those contracts relate to when we receive the federal funding that we can then use to pay them. And so we have very specific timelines for the contracts related from the day we enter into the contract.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. And my second question of clarification, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pima County is renting the Red Roof Inn and Comfort Suites for sheltering of both migrants and homeless individuals. The City of Tucson is renting for sheltering the Grand Lux Hotel, the Hyatt Place Hotel, and Casita Maria. And am I correct in stating that in all of these issues, both city and county, at all of these locations, Pima County is providing food service for all 5 of these locations?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, our contract and the receipt of the funds from the federal government suggest that we do provide the funding to all of those locations, yes.
For so far, a cumulative total of $6.7 million once this is approved.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, that is the amount we have received to be able to be expended on these contracts.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Any objections?
I object.
One objection. Any further objections? Motion carries 2-1. Supervisor Scott?
2-1?
2-1.
Oh, okay.
Supervisor Scott was not at the dais. Item 12, Amendment of Award Master Agreement. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Yes, Madam Chair. This is an amendment for portable computer systems. Basically, I think they're referred to as tough books, and it appears that the Pima County Sheriff's Department is the main recipient of these tough books. Some 450 devices are involved, with the bulk of them going to the Pima County Sheriff's Department for roughly $1 million in contract fees to acquire them. Reading the background, this purchase looks like it's an anticipated purchase, that it was expected and that it was coming up, and that it was well known, or at least cognizant, that this would be an item that would be coming before the board and a request. My question on this is, why is this not a line item budget within the Pima County Sheriff's Department? Instead, it's coming out of the county's general fund. In our District 4 office alone, in our little budget, we have line items for computers. Why doesn't the Pima County Sheriff's Department have it, instead of this coming out of the county's checking department?
Go ahead. Yeah. Chair Brownson, Supervisor Christie, most of these types of refreshes come out of some of these general funds, specifically from the Sheriff's Department. And so the reason it's coming before you today is that particular contract with the state of Arizona is about to expire prior to the purchases of these laptops. And so the state, as part of their state contract, is going to be renewing that, and so we're anticipating the renewal and bringing this forward to you today.
So the sheriff's not going to be reflecting any budgetary expense. It's at the graciousness of the county writing it from our general fund.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Creed, that's correct.
Why? Why isn't it in the sheriff's budget? It seems odd.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, this has been, again, we're trying to expand the master agreement with the state and provide these funds for the individuals in the jail. If you'd like to continue this, and we can go back and see if it's possible to shift the cost to the Sheriff's Department. But we believed it to be a necessary expenditure for the county. Happy to bring it
Well, I
back.
understand it's necessary, but it seems to me it should have come out, and I'm going to vote in favor of it, but it really belongs in the sheriff's budget.
But, Madam Chair, she's offered to continue it to try to get it into the sheriff's
Okay.
budget. Is that a possibility?
Is that going to be a problem? Time constraints?
I believe the term, I don't have that right in front of me to see what that date is with the expiration. We are looking at an initiation date of October 18th of last year, so let me look at that. What we can do, if you would, or another option is to approve it today, and then we can get back with you on a report of how we can move the funds to the appropriate department.
It just seems appropriate for the sheriff to be gulping this one rather than the
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor
Was this a
Grijalva?
change in, it's not a change in a vendor, but a change in equipment? Was there something that had to do with, I thought it had something to do with not being able to update the current equipment or something like that? No, it's just a refresh?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva. No, these are standard equipment. It's just the way in which we purchase this through state contract.
Okay.
That state contract needs to get renegotiated and approved through the state, through the vendor. Therefore, there's the delay in purchasing this equipment. But it's the same standard equipment.
Okay. I'll go ahead and move the item.
It's already been moved and seconded.
Okay.
So there's a motion and a second on the floor to approve. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 13, Diamond Transportation. Supervisor Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Here again, this is basically to...
I got to do a motion and a second. All right, Supervisor Christie.
Basically to keep the public appraised of the cumulative monies that have been spent to transport asylum seekers. This particular award is to Diamond Transportation Arizona, Diamond Transportation, Mountain View Tours, Citizen Tours, Gray Line Tours, and Beeline Tours Transportation, which purpose is to provide for transportation services for asylum seekers. This amendment exercises the annual renewal option to extend the termination date to April 11th of 2023, and we're increasing the contract amount by $500,000 to a cumulative amount of $1,050,000, basically to drive folks from the Nogales Port of Entry and Tucson soft-sided. What does soft-sided mean?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor, apologies, it's the Department of Homeland Security facility. Don't know the exact location, but it is a DHS
Is it the one out here on Los Reales?
Yes.
And that's considered soft-sided because obviously it has soft sides?
It is a federal asset run by the Department of Homeland Security and is soft-sided.
Thank you. So the transportation is from the Nogales Port of Entry to Tucson soft-sided facilities and to Casas, and from Casas Elias Welcoming Center to IRC. What is IRC?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, IRC is one of the partners that house individuals that are in the Phoenix area.
So they go from Casa Elias to Phoenix?
Some do, yes.
Some do. So it also goes, the information I've been given also goes on to discuss differences in long distance impact of these trips and short-distance vendor impact. How do you define a long-distance impact and a short-distance vendor impact?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, they're specifically delineated in the contract, were responded to in the RFP by the vendors of what is the mileage and what is the area or the range considered short. And then when we began to expand at the federal government's request for these contracts to look at additional capacity, we went into the longer term. Do we have the exact mileage? No, we can get that for you, but it's ranges that were identified in the RFPs.
I see. So to summarize, there have been, to date, long-distance impact of 30,130 passengers, and then short-distance vendor impact of 12,520 vendors for, if you total those two together, that has been for over 42,650 passengers, totaling 3,880 trips. And this is taxpayer-funded, taxpayer money to transport asylum seekers from various locations and now up to Phoenix. And it's so far totaled what do I have? What was it? I had some a total of $1,050,000 since looks like April. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion? Any objections?
I object.
One objection. Any further objection? Motion carries. I'm not sure Dr. Hines, Supervisor Hines is on, but motion carries 3-1. Can we verify if Dr. Hines, if Supervisor Hines is on?
Madam Chair, IT has confirmed that he is connected and audio is connected. Supervisor Hines, are you available?
Okay. Motion carries. And now we move on to item 15, not development. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
I just wanted to pull this so I had the opportunity to vote against it.
There are no further discussion. Are there any objections?
I object.
One objection from Supervisor Christie. Motion carries. Moving on to item 16, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Grijalva, I think you pulled these items.
Yes, and actually, if you wanted to combine 16 and 17.
Okay, I'll withdraw my motion if you'll withdraw your second.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'll move items 16 and 17.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Grijalva.
This is investment in the 1801 South Mission property of Pima County, and I just was wondering if we could get some indication as to what services or what we're going to be doing at this facility.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, the first step, this is the facility locates the annex adjacent to the jail located at approximately the corner of Silver Lake and Mission, and it has been empty for a period of time. The majority of the 50,000 square feet is served by evaporative cooling. So these contracts will provide, first of all, the electrical systems necessary to simply allow for additional improvements to take place, and then for the HVAC. So we're looking to upgrade the facility for a variety of potential uses at some point. What we are looking at currently is the potential to come to the board and look to expand some of the pretrial services capability. We have a couple of trailers out on that site that are woefully inadequate to provide those services, and then to provide hands-off or the inclusion of some wraparound services for individuals dealing within that pretrial situation. It is one of the assets that we're looking at of utilizing, as you hear more about, and we continue to work with addressing issues related to street living, homeless, and within this community.
So this is also addressing people who are being released and those that are pretrial services. So they're already on our facility, and we're providing them hopefully services before they exit our facility.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, that's correct. It is hoping that the individuals there can get additional services. It is not increasing foot traffic and population within.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because that has been one of the #1 concerns of community members around the jail, is that because the releases are happening at all hours of the day and night, that and some people really do need some services before they leave our property, this will give us hopefully an opportunity to be able to provide those services and really address a big concern of the community members around that area.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 24, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Just pulling this. I'm pulling this, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to vote against it.
All right. If there's no further discussion, are there any objections?
I object.
Hearing one objection from Supervisor Christie, motion carries. Moving on to item 28, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a grant acceptance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to provide for racial and ethnic approaches to community health Pima partnership in the amount of $1,151,882. In the background, it states that the $1,150,882 million is just for COVID and flu shots. And these flu shots are to be dispensed for, and I quote from the background, quote, American Indian and, quote, Mexican American communities. My question is, if they're going to have this kind of money for vaccinations and inoculations and shots, what about the other shots? Measles, mumps, rubella? We have all this money for one type of shot, the COVID shot, which we know at this point never worked as advertised, and the flu shot, but what about these communities receiving for $1.1 million shots that really matter, and shots that once you get the inoculation, you stay well from them, like measles, mumps, and rubella? Why isn't that included in this?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, it's a terrific question, and the response that we've put together to the CDC is specifically responsive. The proposal that we put together to the CDC is specifically responsive to what they wanted to hear. We have an actually excellent footprint for the delivery of the balance of vaccines. In this case, the Centers for Disease Control was looking to increase vaccination in certain target demographics, and that's why they made that supplemental award.
$1 million for a lot of it is going to a shot that does not work.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I think your categorization is incorrect. The COVID vaccination is successful and has been a successfully deployed strategy. It has decreased mortality and it has decreased hospitalization.
Decreased hospitalizations. I remember when, if you got the COVID vaccination, you would never, ever, ever, ever have to wear a mask again. And now we're spending this kind of money
Can we move
for
on?
a vaccination that there's just as much evidence that it doesn't work. How many times have people got the vaccination? How many times have they gotten sick? The boosters gotten sick, booster again, sick. Anyway, I'm all in favor of all of the vaccinations and shots and everything. I just got a flu shot myself the other day. But it just seems a lot of money for the COVID shot. But if it provides those communities some sort of protection, at least the flu shot, I will vote for it. But it's certainly, someone along the line here with these COVID shots is making an awful lot of money.
Chair Bronson.
And we know that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Supervisor Grijalva.
Chair Bronson, I just think that it's really horrible to malign the vaccine that has, as Dr. Garcia stated, proven successful. In our own community, it's proven successful. And you know, what we're doing is we're utilizing and taking an opportunity to get federal dollars to provide these services here locally. And I just don't, I want to make sure that the community hears from the doctor that is on our staff very clearly, as opposed to what I consider to be a lot of misinformation from the dais.
Misinformation from the dais.
All right, let's...
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Let's move on. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries.
Chair Bronson?
Madam Clerk.
For the record, the consent calendar was approved, the remainder as amended, because consent calendar item number 26 was continued to November 1st. And also, Supervisor Hines, are you online? So for the record, Supervisor Hines was not part of the consent calendar items discussion.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to item 13, meeting schedule. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, objections, hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 14, County Administrator's update. County Administrator.
Chair Bronson, thank you very much. And if I may, I'd like to take a few minutes at the beginning of this report to provide a quick update on what the county has been doing in the area of working with our homeless population, particularly focused in these initial days on the street living homeless that have been affecting lots of individuals and businesses within the community. We have been attending meetings of and meeting with a coalition of businesses that is now known as the Tucson Crime-Free Coalition. And we also have representatives from the Small Business Commission. Mr. Jacobson is here today, who are also part of that coalition, and I believe it's expanding regularly, daily, is what it appears at this time. We've been working with the city of Tucson, where we are seeing a lot of problems within this street living homeless concerns, and we are looking to identify an individual that will be a jointly funded position, we hope, reporting ultimately to both Mr. Ortega and to me, who can be a good point of contact for people who are dealing with a variety of the issues relating to law enforcement, cleaning, et cetera, so that we can begin to work on the protocols and find out, what solutions might be. We've been in some discussions with Mr. Dan Ranieri from La Frontera, as well as other nonprofit organizations, to see what it is we need to continue to do to expand availability of wraparound services and additional, eventually housing treatment facilities as well. We had a meeting last week with Superior Court Judge Danelle Liskey, who runs the STEPS program, which is a drug diversion program, recognizing that there's a variety of elements that are going to need to come together to address this concern, and we learned about how that diversion court might fit into the other work that's going on in terms of homeless treatment services. As we mentioned a few moments ago, we are evaluating a variety of county properties to see if there are any assets that the county might have that could be made available at any point for either short, middle, long-term kinds of solutions to these problems. One of the ones we've been looking at, as I mentioned, was the Mission Annex building, to see what we can do with behavioral health providers to provide some of those wraparound services. And then we have been exploring a variety of options. Lots of people have been sending options that are occurring in other communities. City of Tempe is one that we have been receiving a lot of information about, and we're actually trying to set up a meeting with the Tempe staff. So I know that we have been in contact with many of your offices about this issue, and we know that in the meetings with the community and with the Small Business Commission that it is at the forefront of many people's minds as we begin to look at it as what we need to do. And I can assure you that throughout the county we have a variety of departments that are engaged with the homeless protocol, and we continue to work with our jurisdictional partners on the issue as well.
Thank you.
If I can just take a couple quick seconds. Sorry, I want just a couple of shout outs because they were important. Many people got involved recently with and watched the Arizona Daily Star's Best of Show Awards, or the awards for the Reader's Choice. There were a variety of nominees and winners in a whole bunch of categories, and I think worth a shout out is Pima Animal Care, because it received the Best of Show, and by that it means it got more votes than any other single business or entity. And if you remember looking through that, there were lots of them. So I think that speaks volumes to some of the great work being done at PAC. And then lastly, just a quick congratulations at this point to the Emergency Eviction Legal Services Program that just won the Award of Excellence from the National Association of County, Community, and Economic Development. So 2 programs that you have mentored and supported and funded worthy of congratulations. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's move on then to item 15, fiscal year 2023-24 budget process. I'm also going to include item 4 on the addendum agenda, which is discussion direct fund balance policy for the general fund, discussion direction action related to the general fund balance policy.
If I may, Chair Bronson, for just a moment before Ms. Moulton speaks, I want to thank the board for this opportunity. I think, as we have discussed in the past in previous years, and some of you have experienced this for many years, the budget is finalized and distributed on or about the last day of April, and then within about 2 weeks, the board has a variety of hearings and moves immediately into tentative budget adoption, and then final. Our hope has been that we allow for a greater opportunity for the Board of Supervisors to indicate direction or provide guidance before we begin to build the budget, and come back then with a budget that reflects everything you're saying from the beginning. If you recall, in the last years, it was sometimes the day of budget hearings that we were responding to requests and information about what other programs might, how they might be fit into the budget, et cetera. So I very much appreciate the early guidance from the board. In addition, it is our belief that by beginning these meetings at this time and sharing all of this information with the public, that allows for much greater transparency of the budget and the budget process. So thank you for that. And of course, Ms. Moulton is here, the Director of the Finance and Risk Management Department. We also have Michelle Campaign, who is a Senior Advisor on all things financial. So lots here to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
And then quickly, with item 4 on the addendum and this item, what board action are you anticipating?
Chair Bronson, members of the board.
Or what board action would you like to anticipate?
We would like to anticipate that you approve the fund balance policy, and the rest of the material is for discussion purposes. So that is the only action that we want, is for you to approve that new policy. And if you have any questions, I don't have a prepared presentation. I have information for any questions that you have, and it seemed that this would be the better place to stand.
Okay. Any questions?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Scott.
Thank you. Ms. Moulton, on the memorandum that we received September 30th from Ms. Lesher, fiscal year 23-24 budget process, general budget guidance, when I'm looking at scenarios 3 and 4, there is an anticipated increase to the library district only if we go with the combination of those 2 scenarios, PAYGO plus state cost shifts. We put additional, we had an increase in the library district secondary tax this fiscal year to help prepare a fund to pay for the early childhood scholarships after the ARPA funds expire after next fiscal year. Are we not anticipating that we will need to do anything to help further build up that reserve in the coming fiscal year?
We will need to address that as the PEEPS program will need additional funding. What this information was designed to provide was to start the discussion. We are anticipating right now a 4.3% increase in net assessed values based on where we stand today. We will not get the final information from the assessor's office until December and then January, the final roll, but this was merely to provide you with information as to a starting point. So this looks at our current tax rates and our current new, if you will, net assessed value. So just a starting point, not a determination of any changes in taxes.
So the 0.40 I'm sorry, the .0040 increase in the library district under the combination of scenarios 3 and number 4, that is completely related to state cost shifts, has nothing to do with the PEEPS program.
That is correct. It is the state cost shifts and the anticipated increase in net assessed values.
Okay.
All right. Any further questions? Okay, moving on to item 4 on the addendum. I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Objections?
Chair
Hearing-
Bronson?
Oh, Supervisor Graham.
I'm just glad to see that we're establishing a policy. I think that that's a really good precedent for the kind of work that administration is, and the goals administration is going towards, and I'm glad to see that there's a policy behind it.
I concur with your remarks, and I won't repeat them.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Christie.
I would just hope that we expend special effort in the upcoming budget process to work towards making our budget as revenue neutral as possible. And in any way we can continue to lower property taxes in this manner, I think is in these times are essential. So I would just urge that we all keep an open mind, but remember that the main focus is to keep our residents as revenue neutral on their property taxes as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, and if there are no further,
I'm sorry,
Supervisor
Madam Chair.
Scott.
Thank you. Going to the section of that memo dealing with vacant positions, quoting from it, over the past 2 years, the county has recognized between $13 and $16 million in net vacancy savings in the general fund. The average vacancy rate has been as high as 15% for the past 2 years. I am grateful and applaud the change that says that any position that has been vacant for 180 days or more and is not currently being recruited will be eliminated from the department's budgets effective November 1st of this year. But then there's a reference to a new PCN reserve, and this PCN reserve will be used to fund new position requests from general fund departments that do not have any vacant positions and have demonstrated a need for additional staffing. I'd like to know a little bit more about how appointing authorities in those general fund departments would make a request for funding from the PCN reserve.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, the process that we are hoping to implement is a relatively simple process. We heard a great deal from departments saying that requesting a new PCN was very difficult. It required almost an act of God sometimes to get things accomplished. So what we're trying to do with eliminating these older PCNs that are not being actively recruited is to put in place a process that would be very straightforward. You would, Finance and Risk Management is working with the Human Resources Department to design that process so that the department director could hopefully fill out a one-page request. It would go through a very simple process, be approved or not approved, and be then put into place relatively quickly.
You know, I appreciate that because I think this part of the overall policy is absolutely critical in terms of its overall success. And I would really like to know, as one supervisor, if you start to get a lot of requests from any general fund department for funds from that new PCN reserve, because to me that would be a significant concern if you were starting to get a lot of those requests from one or more general fund departments. So I wonder if that could be included in either the county administrator's update or any other report to the board, because that's certainly something I would like to know about, especially given the discussions we had throughout budget hearings on the differences between departments in terms of vacancies and advertising, and there just didn't seem to be any consistency. Now there is a proposed consistency, and if any department is straying from that, I would definitely like to know.
We'll be happy to include that in the monthly financial report to the board that you'll be receiving on an ongoing basis.
And then, oh wait, I should have asked that with the other item. Never mind.
Oh, okay. All right. There's no further discussion. Are there any objections?
I object.
One objection. Any further? Motion carries 3-1. Moving on.
Thank you.
To items 17 and 18. I just want to note, item 17 is contingent upon approval of agenda item number 18, and on item number 18, the clerk's note, this item is contingent upon approval of agenda item number 17. So, Madam Clerk, shall we do 17 first and then 18? All right. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll move the item.
A second.
Motion and a second item. This is 17. Any objections?
I object.
One objection. Motion carries 3-1. Moving on to item 18. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Objections?
I object.
One objection. Hearing no further objection, motion carries 3-1. We now move on to hearings, franchise license permits, items 19 and 20. One's a liquor license, the other is fireworks permit. Again, these are hearings. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us on these items at this time? If not, I move to close public hearing and approve items 19 and 20.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to the addendum agenda, we have one item left. Item number 5, Board of Health, appointment of Adelita Escarjava to fill the vacancy created by Dr. Matt Hines. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Objections?
I object.
You're out of order. There are no objections. Motion carries 4-0. That brings us to the end of today's agenda. If there are no objections, this meeting stands adjourned, and our next meeting will be October 18th.
Thank you.